Jesus and Me at 33. By Chris Matheson. Hell of a good book, Jesus. In the history of literature there can only be one first place. This sublime tomb is greater than the love child of War and Peace and When Harry Met Sally combined. Bravo! The god themselves applaud. Great literature review. This is a hell of a book. Comedy genius and masterpiece are overused words these days, but in this case, they so apply. 10x. Chris is the new Elvis. I'm mailing him my panties. Mother Teresa. I was rushed to hospital because I dared to read this book in public. I didn't appreciate its sheer power, and for that lack of respect, I suffered a ruptured spleen from holding my laughter in. The government should bury this book in a lead-line storage facility on the moon to stop humanity becoming a race of mindless drooling zombies from having their brains explode from this book's sheer awesomeness radiations. Yes, that is a technical term, look it up. Gay Martian Chronicles. This is a seriously funny book. Loved it, really quirky, and kept me guessing to the end, who knew the butter did it. The author has sure had an interesting life and distilled some great wisdom out of it. I'm recommending this to the whole White Brotherhood at the Golden Dawn Sirius Lodge. Seriously, it is that good, a real classic to be placed next to the Necronomicon on any self-respecting magician's bookshelf. I have seen the face of comedic metaphysics and its name is Chris Matheson. 33rd degree Master Mason Hermes Jones. Jesus and Me at 33. An Essence book. For my beautiful boys Geordie and Tyler. Love always. Thanks also to my other family for all your support and to my editor and computer supplier Cheryl Matheson. Chris got the comedy itch when he co-wrote the Alien Television Workshop variety series which aired last millennium in Australia and England, Getting Old. This led in a roundabout but inexorable way to his rather dubious memoir Bex, Drugs, and Rock 'n' Roll. He hanging with the cool kids again and so now offers up this tidbit of wisdom they've taught him, to balance out and atone for the past. He lives in Rockhampton and spends his time pretending to be a mouse for his cat Luna, who gives great story tips by the way, teaching, painting, creating music with the falling echoes, running Stargate activation meditations and telling stories. Further fun from future fetch frolics found from fructuous fantasticating of folio fecundity. Suggested reading. Stupid actions often flow from holding on to a strong principle. They think I'm a man out of control. But I've never had so much control. 33rd degree Master Mason Hermes Jones. JC and Me at 33. So how did I get here again? I'm 33, broke and currently drowning, and I don't mean that as a metaphor. The born again shoved my head under the waters for the third time, the baptismal waters, and I prayed he didn't bring it out only twice. See where a great divorce leads you? Like a feather swept up by a Newtonian force I was removed from the inertia of wedded bliss just a few months ago to take up residence in Heartbreak Hotel. The ex made the break quickly and cleanly and there was no going back. Some people won't love you no matter what you do while some won't stop loving you no matter what you do. I guess I didn't pick the right one. Sure, maybe I'd gotten lazy and was running on points for style and she was justified, but she put the knife in when I least expected it, had become destabilized, and so now here I was. It was getting harder to breathe under here. I was in a place at this moment where I couldn't hide my head in the sand as I was drowning underwater, so I had traded one pain for another. Oh well, at least I wouldn't become a sad old man dying of cancer at this rate because it'd be a young good-looking corpse. To survive and earn my golden ticket to the golden slumbers of my golden years would cost a midlife crisis, which would be about as fun as navigating my way out of a room filled with barbed wire. Funny. Chris is in crisis. What's in a name or a language? A lot by the looks. Crisis in Chinese means opportunity, so maybe there was hope. I lived in interesting times for sure, as the curse goes. but I had the dogs at my door and they smelled sweet fresh meat, and the harvest was ready for reaping. The fear was growing under here. Looking up from down under to the frenzied surface, I had a fisheye lens view of the preacher. Big Bopper was doing the honors today. He was an ex-outlaw bickie and drug addict but had found God, or God had finally caught up with him. It happened one night as Bopper put down the bong. In Bopper's house the bongs never cooled back in the 80s, back when he was thin as a speed freak with the skates on all the time. Suddenly his wall had slipped away and amidst the spectral swirls a giant eyeball was giving him the evils, radiating cold shafts of broken glass. The eyeball undid his mind and he corkscrewed out the top of his head into hyperspace. He was given a preview to the house of pain that awaited him if he didn't straighten out, and so he had. He swapped his hedonistic life for the collar and chain rules of a born-again bunch of Baptists. Head played his new role so well that Head been given a pat on the back and made the grade of minister. He even changed his nickname to Cornelius when on holy temple ground, as that had a more suitable biblical ring. Minister Cornelius, please meet the Big Bopper. What a charade, but at least it got him off the dope and up to a remedial level of morality. Minister Bopper's hand was planted firmly in my chest and pinned me to the bottom of the baptismal font cum dirty old bathtub. The kind Bopper had probably used to make gin back in the day with his outlaw buddies. In my mind I was screaming my safe word uncle, but little good that did. Bopper's hand was like a ham hock and he had the advantage of leverage. Squirm, splash, squirm. As I was sliding into an ice-warm unconsciousness, the velvet glove was replaced by the slap of cool air. Arise, brother Ananda, and join the flock. It chosen Ananda subversively. I was down sure the divorce had raped my male ego, but my mischievous gene wasn't totally fried, and I still had a sense of irony, maybe even a greater sense following the divorce. That tree had been watered daily since D-Day. More on that later. Anyway, Ananda is Sanskrit for bliss, and it tickled my fancy to use an Indian term in a Western baptism as a little reminder that this wasn't the only spiritual game in town. Before the ceremony I had been keen to join this group as I wanted to harmlessly pass away time in the grasslands with the other sheep. Hopefully the flock would give me solace, or so I reasoned. I needed a place to lick my wounds. It was either this or join the local Lions Club, but I was too lazy to go around putting up park benches and gazebos, so the baptism seemed like a bargain deal in comparison, but I was wrong. I had briefly toyed with joining the Masons first. I went to their main temple in town and pretended I was an architecture student and told them I wanted to study their layout. Wow, it was like a cross between a parliamentary lodge and a magic coven once you got the chance to view it from the inside. A giant golden liturgy hung down on a chain from the roof in the main ritual room, and the floor was dualistically tiled in black and white. Both sides of the room were flanked by elevated rows of chairs. Outside of the hall were many identical classrooms, all equipped with one blackboard, chairs and an upright piano. Some of the blackboards appeared to have Kabbalistic formulas on them. On one I saw with the words Neptune to crown chakra via the fire element. My mind boggled at what this could possibly mean, so much so that my boggled. In the gift shop on the way out there were books on obscure symbolism and topics such as why Mozart was a Mason. It was all there in his opera The Magic Flute, and for the initiated it was obvious. The signs were everywhere. Judging from the other book titles, it seemed everyone important in history was a Mason. It just never realized it until now. Meanwhile, back in the temple there were Egyptian and military paraphernalia sprinkled round, like swords and the Eye of Horus, and cabinets containing what appeared to be magic trinkets. I was impressed until I started talking to the Masons themselves. They seemed nice enough, but when a balding self-professed 33rd degree Mason, which is the highest level possible, by the name of Hermes started telling me the benefits of belonging to them were out of this world, while suggestively rolling his eyes heavenward in a demented fashion, I decided against it. Just as well, because my subconscious was against the idea as well. That night I had a nightmare where I performed some kind of magical ceremony in a giant stone pyramid. I was given a potion by one of the high priests flanking me who sported billowing robes and a green and gold Osiris high hat. I lay back down in my ornate gold coffin. Instructions to project my astral body out into the stratosphere in the year 3003 were given, and I felt a vortex of energy start to build around me which sent electric shocks through my heart. Like the approach of orgasm, there was something coming. I bailed just before the rite reached its climax and got out, leapt from my coffin, and dashed through the ceremonial chamber to the only exit. Suddenly a descending wall from the roof came crashing downwards, but I slid underneath it just in time, Indiana Jones style, whilst being hotly pursued by the high priests who were now trapped inside. I had the feeling that if I hadn't gotten out I would have been fenced in there with them and the musty old god they were trying to get me to conjure, all trapped forever together like flies in amber. I can accept him part of a spiritual food chain, but decided not today. Locked in there for perpetuity, I'm sure the difference between us would become unbearable. Heaven can call you to action, but I'd rather be left alone on the shore. I just really needed somebody to love, which is the same drive that led me to being baptized by Minister Bopper. Sorry, I meant to say Brother Cornelius. As the air rushed back into my lungs and water ran from my eyes, I looked at the new club I'd entered. Hopefully my new friends would get me by. With just a little help I'd be pushed in the right direction. I might be wrong, but at least I was right where I belonged, or so I hoped. Wrong. What a bunch of freaks. I'd made a mistake. They were all babbling in tongues and two were rolling around on the floor crying. Yep, I'd made a mistake. Buyer's remorse had set in already. I needed to take my receipt and get a refund. I splooched my way out of the gin tub and Bubba gave me a wet slap on the back. Welcome, brother. Sheepishly I left the stage and dried off in a little room hidden from public view. I could feel the community waiting for me to come back from behind the curtains. I was in no rush and started to drag out the costume change. Looking around at the born-again literature that lined the walls were titles like Born Again for Dummies and Have You Really Been Born Again? Good questions, but why be born again when I could just grow up instead, I mused. I eyed the painting of Jesus trying to hand me the present of eternal life, all tied up nicely with a pink bow. The color nicely matched the bathrobe I now had on. Mentally I accepted the present, took a deep breath and walked out to the waiting congregation that had been spying on from an oddly placed one-way mirror. Bearded Brother Malachi rushed forward to shake my hand. Did you feel the angel of the presence, my son? He enthused. I looked into his fervent green eyes. Not really, brother. This gig isn't going to work out. Confusion swirled through those Celtic eyes of his and then he stammered. What do you mean? Well, I think me and God have parted ways for now, brother. I'm not saying I'm batting for Team Satan, just that this isn't for me, not at this time. I've just realized. Satan's boring, but he gets points for flash. What I'm trying to say is you have been real nice and all, but I didn't get to finish. He started to charge at me and lunged for my robe, but I dodged, leapt over the prostrate congregants between me and the door, and ran down the road in the church's pink bathrobe all the way home. Thankfully they stopped pursuing me at the church grounds boundary, but their bitter curses rang in my wet ears as I made my way to safety. Little did I know that I was just jumping from the frying pan into the fire. Unbeknown to me, the next few years were going to be a wild ride. Plenty of fish. Well, maybe the spiritual path isn't the right way to ease my divorce angst. Perhaps him being too highbrow and booze and boners are the real solution to all my cares. With this in mind I went to the dating site, Plenty of Fish, and the web page was still up and running last time I checked, just in case you want to join the Lonely Hearts Club. Whilst sipping my frosty gin and tonic I drawled though my competition. Other fellas had put up banners to attract the ladies saying things like, I'm kind of a big deal, insanity in a spray bottle, my penis has a mullet, couch potato ending relationship with TV. Here, because I'm not all there, my top 3 make-out music list is Pop Goes the Weasel, The Imperial Death March, and Buttin' on the Ritz. I have the power of invisibility, but it only works when nobody is looking, and my personal favorite, We All Just Fucking Nuts. Say goodbye to those lonely nights, lads. Ladies can't resist those bombs, or can they? Don't get me started on their profile pics either, but I will say that I didn't know that Christopher Walken and Vampira had a love child. Under the heading must suffer harder, a goth bondage master wannabe balefully peered out at me from under his heavily mascaraed eyelids and locks of greasy hair, whilst his lipsticked mouth curled up, leering an invitation to a party not many would be tempted to attend. Healed people heal people, and hurt people, that's a simple truth. Scrolling through those profiles got my imagination fired though. Visions of disastrous first dates and even worse second and third ones where desperate and damaged people settled for not just second best but bottom of the pile. The place where the pile got piles, and the hurt just kept circling round and round for generations like a big dark Ouroboros eating and feeding itself. Still, my brother had met his nice Korean bride on one of these sites, so ignoring my better judgment I handed over my credit card details and started setting up dates, but I never continued past the first one I went on due to the trauma I suffered, which I'll relate to you now. Dante's profile pic looked good, but her name had me worried. I'd never heard of a female Dante, in fact I'd never met a living one of either sex. And the title Dante's Inferno sprang to mind, reminding me of the only character I knew with that name. Surely it must be pronounced like dainty, I reasoned. So I sent her a wink via an emoticon, and a quick message to say we should hook up. As I took another swig of courage I could see my reflection in the monitor, and my face was bathed in the lurid phosphorus light of her profile, which I had maximized to fill my screen. She was a pretty blonde, nicely dressed, and her blurb mentioned she liked to write, take long walks on the beach and hang with her friends, so there was plenty of common ground there, or so I reasoned. 2 minutes after sending my invite I had a reply, and she had suggested meeting in the local botanical gardens where we could look at the caged monkeys, and then following up with a dinner at the romantic Italian eatery called Inaros down on East Street in the heart of town. That sounded grand, and so the deal was done. Date night had rolled around, so I put on my new two-tone vest of brown and darker brown and checked my look in the mirror. Nice, you've got an autumnal color vibe going on, I thought as I shot myself with my index finger and mouthed the words lady killer to myself and the mirror. The late afternoon sun was still hot as hell when I got to the park. I'd gotten there 30 minutes early and found the bench Dante had mentioned for me to wait at. 30 minutes stretched out to an hour and then just kept dilating. To pass the time I'd imagine I was waiting for a criminal contact person to come and pick up the backpack filled with greenbacks I'd left in the cylindrical bin just over the way. Then when I'd gotten bored of this and a few other fantasies I was about to leave when I saw one of the groundskeepers approach me. As they got closer I noticed a gaggle of kids emerge from the trees and catch up to the person in green paint splattered overalls. My heart started to sink. No, it couldn't be. Soon I heard, "Hi, I'm Dante," pronounced just like in Dante's Inferno, and these little uns be finna, Caitlin, Lauren, Paul, Veronica and Nuz, 3 of them are mine but the other 3 aren't. What kind of a weirdo brings 6 kids to a first date, some not even hers, and who would turn up late while covered in paint? I spied it all over her hands and under her nails. In the flesh she looked more like a man in a wig. My brain was in shock, so I stammered, why you come here often?" whilst silently cursing my brain. "You're not the boss of me, brain, stop stuttering," I thought angrily at myself. Now it was her turn to look as flummoxed as I felt. "Well, what a silly question. Do you think I pick men up in parks or something? I'm a writer, you know. I have class." Putting on a silly voice I bowed and said sorry, me lady, no offense. At least the kids laughed. I needed to do some conversational rebuilding here, so I thought, if in doubt ask the other person about themselves, everyone loves that. I see from your profile you're a writer. I liked your banner, when butterflies fall in love do they feel humans in their stomach? You really caught my attention with that, it was quite poetic. Oh yes, and let me prove what a wordsmith I am, she said, warming to her theme. I have a qualm about the foible of floxin or senile epilification towards triskaidekaphobia, she said triumphantly, pulling out what must have been a practiced party piece. Ah, is that English? It sounds like Latin? I queried. It is English, silly, and means I have a thing about people who don't hate the number 13. I know about the other side, especially since I write dark fantasies, and know they should beware. I've written the Magic Brownies series after all. I looked to the kids to see what they made of this, but they'd heard it all before, and Nuss and Caitlin looked bored while Finna just picked her nose and the rest looked a bit vacant. I hope you don't mind, I couldn't get the babysitter, so I brought the chitlins. What's up with her? Adopting that yokel accent when she can be so high-blown, does she think it is cute, and does she really think this is normal for a first date? I guess she must, the world is full of smucks. Oh, that's fine, I love kids, I have 2 of my own, I added to show I was responsible, but at the same time was not sure why I bothered. Well, let's go see those chimps then, Dante said, and with that she led the way. Deliberately she took a roundabout way to the enclosures, shrieking all the while about how she was having such an adventure and feeling at one with the pixies and brownies she could feel in the surrounding copse of trees. I looked over to Veronica, but she just rolled her eyes. She was on my side, this was no way for a grown woman to act. Soon we were all standing in front of a couple of depressed chimps lying around on the ground behind the grill we were peering through. Man, what have animals ever done for us? They just sit around and eat, Nuss whined. Well, just be thankful spiders can't fly, I ventured, to which Nuss snorted and screwed up his piggy eyes. He pulled out his mobile and started to play a game, and instantly I and the chimps were no longer there as far as he was concerned. Dante looked in 7th heaven and she stopped gooing at the animals long enough to ask a question. So what do you do? Well, I teach English and music around the Rockhampton region, but I'm having a rough time with it. Oh, you poor chitlin, why? Well, I'm a substitute teacher, so I have to do other odd jobs just to live, as I don't get enough work. Also, as I move around schools so much, I find I get no support from the school administrations. I'm just a flash in the pan as far as they are concerned, yet they always tell me what to do when the class gets wild. School admin lecturing teachers on how to teach is like a cat giving swimming lessons. Administrators are often just failed teachers who hate the classroom and have found a place to hide. Dante looked at me shocked like I was a rebel, and I sensed it lost more brownie points on her invisible tally board of whether I was suitable mate material. This was nothing though compared to what happened next. One of the chimps must have found her presence as grating as I did, because they scooped their feces from the bottom of their dirty enclosure and flung it at us. Dante copped the brunt of it, and I and the kids got the rest. She now looked like reality had been suspended until further notice, but at least she was wearing overalls and not her Sunday best like me. Maybe we should go? I ventured, and all the kids agreed. Sometime later we'd made it to the restaurant, and while the company had not got any better, the meal was wonderful and the kids were digging in enthusiastically, but then some water started to drop into my meatball soup from above. Looking up, I could see the problem. There was a giant patch of wet ceiling hanging above us like the sword of Damocles. Somebody must have left the bath running, I thought, and I called over the owner Nero to inquire and to get a new soup. He sprinted over in a highly strung way, profusely apologized, and was gone. I had been wondering why, with the food so wonderful, we were the only ones there, but then concluded maybe it was the hygiene. The restaurant was massive and mainly empty, so I couldn't work out how they were earning a profit. If me, Dante and her brood had not shown up, then there would have been no one here. I doubted if our meal would cover the cost of the rent and wages. The rest of the night was uneventful, and by that I mean the conversation was a dead loss, and I prayed to just get home so I could lick my wounds. At the cashier, Dante insisted we go Dutch. Was she testing me to see if I was a good provider? Whatever, I paid Nero for my half of numerous pizzas and cokes and fled into the night. I emailed her that same night to tell her I just wasn't ready to commit, but I smoothed it over by saying it was a problem with me and not her. I didn't see Dante again until years later, when one day we passed by each other on twin opposing escalators in the shopping mall. Surprisingly, she wasn't dressed up in her green overalls or wearing paint-for makeup, but looked very well turned out, even classy. I concluded the date must have been like some strange hazing ceremony to see whether I was allowed near her clan. Either that or she just wasn't ready to commit and sabotaged the whole date. At least that night wasn't a bust just for me. I read in the paper a few weeks after our tragically unromantic group rendezvous that Nero's had been raided following an anonymous tip-off, and the police had uncovered a speed lab above the restaurant. Apparently Nero had links to the mafia and was using the restaurant more as a front than as a going concern. That explained the leaky roof and the hyperactive look in his eye, and also his lack of concern over clientele. Sure, he was a criminal, and his roof had leaked toxic speed into my meatball soup, but I didn't judge him too harshly. In fact, I like Nero, and way more than Dante. Hell, throw a wig on Nero and he'd be more my cup of tea than her. I can understand why some folks chase the high because they daily live the low, and this leads them to making poor choices, which in a roundabout way leads me back to my booze and boners crossroads dilemma. Thankfully I didn't have to act that choice out to the bitter end, but possessed the wisdom to pull up short of hitting rock bottom after seeing what was on offer in Nero's and Dante's lives. I sat at home after the date nursing an extra large gin and tonic, in a big martini party glass I had bought from a joke store, which flashed bright neon to match my buzzed mood when I pressed a pink button on its plastic glittery stem. I mused that maybe I needed to pull up stumps and call it a day, as the G&T made its oily way down my gullet. Maybe a totally new environment could be the way to rejuvenate and heal. Reaching for a pen, I made a note to call a travel agent in the morning. There'd been a mystery school I'd been dying to go to for a very long time, and now I felt I'd lose nothing by doing so. Especially after that cunning fox spirit entered my room last night through a porthole in the wall to bid me welcome to a greater reality. Who could deny such a sweet face? The Institute, or where Project Stargate goes to die. Well, Freemasons and Baptists hadn't helped, but maybe the Monroe Institute, or TMI, could, but they weren't conveniently located. I would have to trudge to the other side of the world and go to Virginia, USA. Incidentally, a hotbed of paranormal activity and a home to the Mothman, which I'll talk about later. The place was founded by a fascinating soul called Robert Monroe, who was a true consciousness pioneer and a lovely man according to his neighbors. He produced the famous radio show The Shadow back in the day. You may remember the catch cry from years ago. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows. After a successful career in the media, Bob came to a midlife crisis of sorts and had to make a business decision to either pursue the fledgling cable TV market or to invest his millions into a new sound technology he came to call HemiSync, which is short for Brain Hemisphere Synchronization. So what's HemiSync, I hear you ask? Well, their website says it best. Audio sound patterns can have dramatic effects on states of consciousness, and certain sounds create a frequency-following response in the electrical activity of the brain. In layman's terms, your brain is like a tuning fork which will come to resonate in harmony with set sound signals. Eggs graphically show how the mind can be herded via HemiSync into alpha, beta, theta and delta brainwave states, no problem. Beta being the waking, alert state, alpha, a relaxed creative state, theta, a transitory, intermediary mystic state before sleep that kids tend to live in, where fantasy and reality merge, and delta, deep, contentless sleep. The frequency of brain activity is faster for more alert states, while egg readings shows a change from choppy surf patterns to peaceful swells approaching a flat line as you go towards delta. You no longer need to spend years in a hit or miss meditational practice to access psychic realms that normally are only the province of trained monks or madmen. Trying to shepherd your brainwaves on your own is like trying to guide a pack of cats through a narrow gate. Trust me, you need all the help you can get. For long-term meditators, though, this technology is a license to go to warp speed. It quickens, stabilizes and deepens your practice. Monroe's researchers learned specific sounds could be blended and sequenced to gently lead the brain to various states ranging from deep relaxation, or sleep, to expanded states of awareness and other extraordinary cosmic states or peak experiences. This compelling research became the foundation of a non-invasive and easy-to-use audio guidance technology known as HemiSync. The audio guidance process works through the generation of complex, multi-layered audio signals, which act together, to create a resonance that is reflected in unique brainwave forms characteristic of specific states of consciousness. Some audio templates were even copied and mapped from the brains of mystics. The result is a focused, whole brain state where the left and right hemispheres are working together in a state of coherence. As an analogy, lasers produce focused, coherent light. HemiSync is said to produce a focused, coherent mind, which is an optimal condition for improving human performance. We only use 10% of our brains after all, as Einstein famously said, and HemiSync gives you a peek inside your own Santa's workshop at the rest. It is evident that a highly integrated brain, a brain in which both hemispheres are functioning in symmetry, synchrony, harmony and unity, is a key to access groovy states of altered consciousness and psi abilities. I called up my travel agent Jonesy the next day and set it all up. Within a week it'd be there, but it'd have to survive the 20-hour plane flight to New York City. It had been a few years since it'd been in America, and since then 9/11 had made its appearance on the world stage. This translated to us customs now taking hours to clear disembarking passengers as the security had been ramped up so much. I couldn't even get on the plane without taking off my belt and shoes, and getting off was even worse, but I grinned when I thought of the people with pacemakers or whose prosthetics contained metal trying to get through the scanners. "Sir, please just place your heart and leg in the tray and wait over here for them to clear." I also had to smile recalling the card handed to me by the curvy air hostess mid-flight, the only thing she handed me other than bourbon, which was a tick and flick affair and pretty standard stuff except for one question which asked whether I was a terrorist. Who would say yes, and what would happen if they did? Would passengers be expected to lend the captain a hand and wrestle the villain to the ground? Upon arrival I could just imagine the airport terminal crew doing this, though, as I'd never seen anything like them. Maybe it is because I come from Australia and we have the hangover from our English colonial overlords of politeness and reserve. The staff was all Negro and they were treating their job as if they were on the stage. They were wisecracking and calling out loud to each other and gave me a good-natured razzing on the way through. It was fun to watch them in action, but unsettling to be the brunt of their enjoyment, especially being so jet-lagged and sleep-deprived from having an elderly fat lady in a scratchy pink sweater invade my space for most of the flight. I had used her intrusion as a meditational aid though, and practiced my Zen mind as I was now on my renewed spiritual kick, and because booze only goes so far, I survived and cleared customs, then made my 2 connecting flights to Charlottesville, Virginia. My first impression of this charming town was to marvel at the beauty of the landscape. It was autumn and the trees flamed in colors that didn't exist back home. There was a pleasing nip in the air. My second observation was that America is more business-orientated, or maybe they just treat the game more seriously if they decide to play it. There's a feel in the air that gives off this vibe, a certain way people handle you, and an uber professional way businesses present themselves to their clients. Maybe I'm just used to bad service, as Australia is pretty laid back, especially in the country town I hail from. Rocky time means the plumber may turn up sometime this week, if you're lucky. Also, whilst watching the local in-flight news programs on the plane, I noticed subtle changes to how things were reported. A newly launched movie, for instance, was lauded not for its great script so much or for the great cast, but for how much it was raking in at the box office. This seemed to be an end in itself. I remember reading a survey in a psychology journal on what was the #1 value different cultures prize and instill in their citizenry. It turns out Germany loves tradition and high standards. No surprise there. Australia digs fair play, yep, while the USA grooves on results, so it seems. Finally, and feeling like Harry Potter, I washed up at Hogwarts Magical College, also known as the Monroe Institute, nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The very ones John Denver sang about in his song Country Roads. Life is old there, older than the trees. Indeed. It had been a dream of mine to be standing in this very spot when a decade earlier I read Monroe's eye-opening book Ultimate Journey about his far-flung astral travel experiences. At the end of his book I read that he had set up a college so others could duplicate his experiences. By the end of my stay there I realized wanting the same trip as Bob was just the carrot to get me there. Many of the real benefits came from not having an out-of-body experience but from having an inner-body one. The college was captained then by Skip F. Atwater, a bearded kindly grandfather figure who explained complex concepts simply and beautifully. Skip told us how hemisync affects our brain patterns. Different frequencies are played in each ear, which causes the brain to interpret a phase difference. So, the phase difference is interpreted by the brain as being a vibrato. And because we can adjust the frequencies between the two ears, we can change the rate of that vibration within brainwave frequencies and route it where we want the person to go in terms of their consciousness. This vibrato that I came to hear later in my stay was not actually on the tape I was listening to but was created by my own brain. Skip Atwater has an infectious and girly giggle, which sounds rather odd when you first hear it coming from a 6-foot-plus ex-army man with a crew cut. His military background is almost legendary, and his presence at Monroe lends the proceedings a certain Black Ops cachet. We don't have a doctrine. We don't wear white robes, tinfoil hats, or eat only tofu, Skip continued. I was pleased to hear it as they'd taken our watches and I was keenly watching for further subtle mind control. Skip was a key player in the Stargate project established by the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency to investigate claims of psychic phenomena with potential military and domestic application, such as remote viewing. The purported ability to psychically see events, sights, or information from a great distance. The Stargate project created a set of protocols designed to make the research of clairvoyance and out-of-body experiences more scientific. This is the same project ridiculed in the movie Men Who Stare at Goats, a fun movie by the way, and Clooney is easy on the eye, right girls, grrrr. Now while I appreciate that just because your perceptions are epic it doesn't mean you are and that people in altered states can come across like the spacey and loony lead character played by Clooney, but ask yourself this, would Congress pour $200 million into this project over a 20-year period if they didn't get results? Remember what I said earlier about what America values the most. Obviously it worked and they used it for psychic espionage, but they were an intelligence agency. Secrets are their bread and butter, so they won't come clean about their spy versus spy clandestine activities, but fortunately for us the key players in the project have. For what it is worth, I also can personally vouch now from my experiences as to the reality of astral travel, remote viewing and psi capabilities, and have also had these abilities tested objectively. For example, whilst at my eye engaged in a double-blind remote viewing test. In plain English, this means a fellow student went to another room from me and was handed an envelope by an assistant containing a picture chosen at random from a shuffled pile of identical packets sprawled on a desk. While waiting, I quickly settled into the appropriate focus level which I'd learned how to access through the week during the famous Gateway course. The brain is like a radio, and you can tune it to different stations, or focus levels, when you know how. You can dial up bliss, creativity, healing and psychic abilities once you've been trained to do so. So I settled into the right headspace, and then drew what I thought the picture in the envelope was, and also wrote down a few keywords as descriptions of it. I had the focus levels on speed dial now, as I'd learned how to do neuro-linguistic programming on myself. Amazingly, when I saw the revealed picture, I was correct. The image was a stone carving of an Egyptian god sitting a throne. It was Osiris, my old buddy from the Mason Dream in Chapter 1, which shows that remote viewing can occur naturally to and over extended periods, if somewhat cryptically, until the vision has come to pass. In the past, I've also dreamed of future job sites, and people I will meet, which has come true, but sometimes it is years in the future. Suddenly my cluster of squiggles was shown to be a reversed image of Osiris' head and half his body. One of the words it written down was chair, which I took to refer to his throne. The reversal was interesting because our eye reverses all images in our brain. Make of that what you will. The eye views images back to front in the manner of a camera lens, but our brains reinterpret this input to allow us to see things the correct way. Maybe when the brain directly perceives data internally, like a receiving station picking up signals from a multidimensional mind at large, it reverses the image if the flow of information is traveling to the outside instead of in. Or maybe it is true that through the looking glass in astral land everything is a mirror image and back to front. There's some food for thought there, and it fits with my own astral experiences, which I'll talk about later. Another example of objective verification occurred after the course had finished and I was back home hosting astral parties. All the Gateway alumni met up from around the world back at the giant pink Brazilian crystal in that my grounds at a set time and date every fortnight. The 5-ton monstrosity sits 8 feet high in real life, and it is placed near a forest that deer occasionally peek out from, but in the astral I saw it as different sizes, hanging in space, and from odd angles. Once this crystal beacon had gathered us all together, we interacted and then shared notes via the internet later on. Conversations and antics were confirmed. Yes, Greece, I saw you wearing a toga and doing a little dance while you talked to me about your interest in ayahuasca and Peruvian shaman, Bevan typed to me the next day. He was spot on. I had worn a toga and done a jig for a joke to see if anyone would notice, and shaman and sacred medicine were indeed the topic we'd discussed. Amazing proof, considering we did this with his body asleep in America and mine asleep back in Australia. This level of group mind had been fused during our week-long course, and it was pleasing that we were able to maintain it easily once back out in the world. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to the Gateway course for a fly-on-the-wall view as it starts to get into full swing. Gateway. Man, I don't feel like I'm really here. It is like my brain has too many tabs open, Bevan ventured. Benny the Earth Mother, astral tour guide, Gateway facilitator and stepdaughter of the great Bob Monroe, just sagely nodded her grey head. Our other facilitator was the famous medical intuitive John Cortum, who was very sweet, but he didn't say much. It was hard to get a read on the guy as he blended silently into the wallpaper. He was talented psychically, though, as at a young age John recognized the human body projected health information. All of us are really just information transmitters. The whole universe is a vast sea of data which the mystic can happily swim in, while the madman drowns. John was probably gleefully swimming around, which explained his reserve. As in acid tabs, "Hey Bev, welcome to Jesus land," I thought to myself, which made me giggle out loud as I was in an easily amused and slightly stoned, uninhibited mood. See the appendix for background details of where my headspace was coming from with this thought. Penny looked queerly at me, so I mumbled softly, "Well, I feel like a tardigrade." "Did you say retarded?" queried Penny, a little surprised. "No, tardigraded," I said more loudly, not sure if she was taking the piss. They're the first animals known to be able to survive the harsh combination of low pressure and intense radiation found in outer space. True story, look it up. I flashed a quick mind image out through my third eye to Penny to give her the full picture. The image was me as a tardigrade going Geronimo through endless inky space. Penny just nodded sagely again. We were all in a sacred circle under the watchful eye of a fox sculpture, which I learned upon arriving was the Institute's totem animal, as it is a spiritual pathfinder and protector. Many of my course participants sat cross-legged on the comfy deep plush pile carpet, some looked a bit shell-shocked and gazed blankly at the warm wood paneling that covered the room. We were debriefing each other on what we had just experienced in Focus Level 21. The portal to higher energy systems beyond the 3D universe our physical bodies are normally lumbered with. I felt nothing and saw nothing, whined Bill Count, a twitchy millionaire day trader who worked the Chicago futures market. We shared a 2-bed dorm which housed little bunks referred to as check-in units. There are audio speakers on the walls of each unit, level with the pillows. Monroe's voice lives on in the very fabric of the buildings, as his soothing voice is piped into the check-in units. The Institute is a temple to Monroe, sculpted from the sound of his voice. His benign presence is everywhere. Often Bill didn't stick to completing the group exercises. Had kept me awake most of the night analyzing spreadsheets and endless streams of data on stocks and global trends on his laptop instead of being in the check unit. All night long he'd peck away at his keyboard to feed his insatiable need for figures. In short, he didn't have his head in the game. I'm surprised he didn't go riding a giant integer in the moonlight and sail over a dreamland of numbers during the last exercise he did manage to complete, as his imagination must have been soaked in maths. I know because he confessed to me that he thought about numbers 24/7. Seems he was too anchored and concerned about his money to leave it behind and take the leap of faith needed to venture into space like the rest of us. There are no security blankets out there and it requires guts to let go. I guess, like my good buddy Jesus said, it really is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle, dude, than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God, so go for it, YOLO. He must have had Bill in mind when he said that. It sure was an interesting bunch gathered here. A group that would never mix in the outside world due to our vastly different natures and backgrounds, except for one aspect: we were all on the quest. There was Bob the hippie slacker from California, Jade the sexy but lost pole dancer from New York City, Una the aging Jew from Israel who was the disciple of the late great Indian Guru Babaji, Akiko an uptight Japanese girl who hassled me about my quips and hygiene, Sol a Ukrainian mystic who blasted me occasionally with healing side bombs that I felt but didn't see, Chris an ex-alcoholic who was ironically heir to a bourbon distillery, what a waste, a few others I didn't have much to do with, and Forrest, who was a grieving southern gent whose sister had just died. He was here like a man on a mission attempting to contact her. I felt empathy for him and was in a similar frame of mind, as one of my goals that I wanted to achieve this week was to contact my dead brother Timothy, who died when only 7 days old due to a blood infection. I did end up seeing him, but he looked more like a galaxy. He was perfectly happy. I originally thought a little uncharitably that Forrest was simple, but he turned out to be the smartest one in the room. Note to self: don't judge. His super slow southern drawl and reticence made me peg him wrong. Halfway through the course he cheered up after successfully contacting his dead sister, and a door creaked open in his personality through which I started to see a wicked sense of humor and an amazing mind. Treat everybody and everything you meet like God in drag, Forrest said, suddenly surprising everyone with his first public words in the debriefing room since arriving a few days ago. We all cracked up and Penny asked him to clarify while John just smiled. Well, we're all from the source and are just little parcels of it disguised. I know, cause I just went home to God and was shown how it all works. He circled his hand airily in front of his face and continued with his debrief. Beauty, the true nature of God, is realized within space. Ultimately there is no good or evil at the highest level, but only energetic ratios which the Godhead transforms to absolute glory. The depth of my eye received this revelation through a myriad of kaleidoscopic patterns which I followed back to their root. The microscopic canals of my ear continually decoded a latticework of crisscrossed sound waves, and I followed them too like it found a trail through a forest. The intricate cavities of my body facilitated an orchestral movement that perfectly resonated with my own internal changing environment. I saw with my third eye how our planet vibrates with the movement of human, animal and plant life as she glides her gilded path around our flare-emanating sun, guided by angelic forces. Each celestial orb in our solar system adds its own operatic voice to this magnificent choral arrangement. Against the backdrop of the most fantastic light and sound show ever seen, and I was at one with the center and source of it all, Forrest poetically finished up to a shell-shocked room. Man, where had that come from? I mused. Penny nodded sagely and said, anyone else like to share? Forrest put forth once again, if I may. I'd just like to say humans exist by gravity. Gravity is a function of geometry, geometry is a result of the property of light through space and time, and light is a gift of the gods. The best way to make your dreams come true is to wake up to these truths. The goal of life is not to possess power but to radiate it. We have Prometheus' gift in our own hands. I was stifling another laugh as I'd been watching Bill roll his eyes throughout this wild monologue. Maybe if he smoked a pile of high-grade Colombian grass Bill would see something other than numbers, I mused. A few minutes' silence arose as the group contemplated Forrest's eloquent revelations. The quiet was broken when Una put up her hand and was told not to be shy. Well, when I was with Master at his Indian ashram I had many amazing experiences. Babaji was a true delight but rarely talked and often only smiled sweetly. But it was always knowingly, sometimes even cheekily. His energy emanations were so intense I couldn't stay around him for long even though I felt madly in love with him. 2 weeks at a time was all I could handle. He'd burn off my karma so fast that there was only so much I could handle as my emotions would seesaw, from elation to depression, and a minute could feel like 6 months. You have to experience it to understand. Well, Baba came to me during the exercise and showed me that we only enter this 3D hologram of a universe to bring back gifts to the Creator who is pure love. The Creator in His kindness allows us to become like Him in the process. The only thing we can give Him is ourselves, but only after He creates the illusion that there can be anything other than God. It was very mysterious, paradoxical, profound, deeply moving, and hard to explain. Una finished with deep emotion. All the room could still feel her guru's powerful energy streaming out from her as she was energetically lit up like a Christmas tree. I think I'm getting focus level envy. It is like all the cool kids at school have got on the bus and I arrived late and so am left by the side of the road. I just feel nothing and only saw some numbers, whined Bill again. Give it time, Bill. Some take longer than others to find their groove, said Penny soothingly. Well, I met God too, and I know you guys love to say God bless America, but it turns out he was an Australian. I couldn't resist trying to lighten the mood a bit after Bill's bitch and also because it was day 3, but Penny just smiled and looked around the room for more serious comments. One is not punished for being an ass, but by being an ass, Chris Brokeny ventured. I was given a life review by my guides and they showed me the karma behind my alcoholism. It was as clear as crystal. He started a business. This wasn't uncommon as today was day 3 of the course. The reason the course is called Gateway is because participants have been found to go through very specific reactions during the program, as the sound technology is energetic dynamite and progressively works up through your chakra system, which as humans we all share in common, and so we tend to have common reactions. That is why the group experience is so necessary. The higher focus levels that take you to Galactic Core are not available to the public for this very reason and are only administered to supervised course participants so people don't skits out, which they may do at home. There was a trained psychologist on hand during our time at MI just in case. Anyway, day 3 hits the throat chakra, which relates to emotional clearing, which is needed before you can travel higher into the universe. I'd been through this myself just this morning when Una found me unexpectedly sobbing on her lap as I released some childhood trauma due to intermittent deafness. The first day had activated our root chakras and the group had become like a bag of squirrels in heat. I even felt like I was in love with everyone, men included, which was a strange sensation as a couple of them were in their 70s and I'm not gay. It felt just like golden liquid love bubbling up from my groin towards them, which shows how emotions and energies are linked and how romantic love may be the biggest illusion of all if you can feel it towards total strangers after being stimulated by an energy increase. If I thought the feeling was being created by a love interest, and not internally, it'd be head over heels, but in this setting I could process it differently. There's a danger at the start of the Gateway program because your ego wants to jump on this blissful sexual energy and eat it all up for itself, as it is just so sweet and tasty. To indulge in this though stops the energy building up within your spine, which is attempting to reach a critical mass so as to rocket you into the cosmos. Another problem with indulging in it is the potential it creates for unwanted entanglements back on Earth if the energy is not forced upwards. It is a blessing and a curse at the same time. Like Moses in the biblical book of Numbers, you have to raise the fiery serpent of Kundalini, known to its friends as Uraeus, up to the top of the pole/spine, just as the Caduceus medical symbol demonstrates. To the Greeks, Egyptians and Indians it was well known that the twin astral snakes representing the solar and lunar currents, which govern the human nervous system, rise up through the 7 chakras to become the winged globe of divine consciousness. This also explains the pharaoh's forked scepter. It is no surprise that trainers have coined the term monromance to wittily sum up the perils of this phenomenon. The word is an amusing play on Bob Monroe's surname, and I like to think of it as moon romance. It should be mentioned that this battle with the energy is not a rational process but a whole-body experience more linked to your desire body, which has a mind all of its own. Until you experience it you can't imagine the powerful seeds that are locked up in your astral form waiting to blossom, hopefully for harmless processing. Personally, I get sick of the taste of that level of energy after a while and just want Ban to go back into the forest to play where he belongs. I wish there was a big red button I could push so all my instincts could dissolve, but I guess that's called a lobotomy, as they are so intimately bound up with individuality, which is a topic he'll discuss later. If this is starting to sound too out there, it helps to realize that everyone is psychic already. Yes, that also means you, and so everyone can share these revelations if they put in the work, and follow the correct protocols. I can hear you scream, but I'm not psychic. So let me tell you about a little experiment to get you to reconsider. You really are psychic but just don't know it yet. A group of test subjects were shown randomly selected images by a computer that were either sweet or threatening, such as a teddy bear or a striking snake. Their involuntary galvanic skin responses were measured, as well as their heart rate and pupil dilation. Guess what? 1 to 3 seconds before the picture was projected, the person's body would respond appropriately to whether the image was going to be good or evil. The cute puppy would lower their heart rates while the evil clown would have them break a sweat even before they had been seen physically. The conclusion from this is that for survival humans are already kitted out and hardwired to be precognitive, even if it is only by a few seconds. and for this reason it remains a bit of a secret. Normally the rush of adrenaline and relief that you experienced after escaping a tiger would mask the fact that you'd been recently psychic, for example. The good news is that this innate ability can be extended and harnessed through training. Most people don't bother though because they either don't know they can do so, or because they have a life, or because it is as demanding as getting a black belt if you want to be great at it. Speaking of getting a life, with the course finishing in a few days and with some much-needed healing under my belt, it was getting high time for me to start thinking about getting back to mine, but first I wanted to go to an island, a real one, and not a metaphorical spiritual one either. Time to earth out and party with some of my cracked friends from around the globe. As it turns out they were too loopy to be cooped up in the one spot for long and should have remained scattered to the winds. The island. You've probably heard the pop song by the Chanters Charlene that goes "I've been to paradise, but I've never been to me." Well, with me it was the other way around. I'd spent a week in Virginia plumbing my occult depths and now needed some yang partying to balance out all that astral yin goodness or it'd float away into the ether. I placed some phone calls on the last day of my gateway course to the usual suspects. Mole Island, eh? Sounds like a great place to get some tail, in. Just hope it lives up to the promise of its name, enthused Bri, who then broke into some spontaneous poetry. Ants love sugar like bees to honey, and women will swell when the moon turns sunny. Yeah, I can use a break from all the snotty shits I've taught this year, lamented Dwayne before perking up and asking, say, when on holidays, what time is beer o'clock? Sure, my New Year's resolutions were to put on weight, start smoking, and be lazier anyway. Well, be chillin' like a villain, no problem catching a flight. Him in for sure because Daddy will spring some green for it. I'll hit him up tonight for some cabbage, crowed Noel. Of course I'm in, said Ned like he'd asked him to tell me the time instead of fly to an island on the other side of the world. Randomly he added, say, have you noticed how Chad Smith, the drummer of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and comedian Will Ferrell are never seen in the same room together? This random comment really showcases his conversational stylings and maybe hints at why the tension started building on the island pretty quickly. The phone calls had been made and my motley crew were all in and soon would be flying over from India, Canada, Slovenia, and South Africa to get to South Mole Island, located in the beautiful Whitsunday Archipelago region off the coast of Queensland, Australia. All of us bar Ned had been through Teachers College together back in the day at the University of Toowoomba. The facility boasted an internationally acclaimed course which attracted students from the four corners of the globe. We'd all kept in touch and tabs on each other's teaching careers throughout the years. All except for Ned, who worked in sanitation and had other things on his mind, not to mention his hands. A few days later and did survive DUS customs and the 20-hour flight back home and was sitting on the back deck of a fast and flash ferry that was speeding through perfect weather past Hamilton Island. The sky was crystal blue and the water we were slicing through was a striking turquoise. The captain's voice piped out over a speaker that the mansion to the right of us was owned by the Beatle George Harrison. I could understand why he bought it. If I had the money to live anywhere in the world, it'd do the same, as this locale is as close to heaven as you're likely to get this side of the veil. 30 minutes later it arrived, disembarked and beanlied. I met up with my four amigos who had been waiting for me in reception. We all had on Hawaiian shirts, as agreed, and we all sported colorful garlands of flowers. There was much backslapping, jiving and high-fiving. Bri looked up suddenly from a brochure head swiped from the front desk. Hey man, great to see you, but check it. They've got something here called Garbage Bag Night, and it is tonight. Sounds romantic, I said. Yeah, it is like a toga party but we come in garbage bags instead. What an icebreaker, I'm so set to score. Garbage bags, can you believe it? Where is everybody? Said Ned, alerting us to the obvious. The place was quiet, real quiet, deathly quiet, and apart from us and the staff I hadn't seen anybody else. Where were the babes? Well, I was just chatting up the desk clerk. She likes me, I can tell, said Wayne. I found that a little hard to believe as he is a short, fat, and bald Indian, but then he did have some charm working in his favor. Had been a used car salesman before becoming a teacher, and he treated his love life like a numbers game or a war of attrition. I never saw him discouraged by his many romantic rejections. He treated each no as a bridge that would get him closer to a final yes. His philosophy was to never treat the first 5 no's seriously. She tells me that heaps of people should start to arrive soon. Not that I need anyone else, as my senorita is in the bag. Noel checked out the talent behind the desk and said, "She seems to be frowning at you, Dwayne. What did you say to her?" "Just gave her one of my cards. Check it out, bro," he said, flicking out a piece of purple cardboard from his top pocket. It was homemade and amateurish looking. Noel laughed and handed it to me. It was a naked picture of Dwayne with the enticing claim, "You know you want it," written in what looked like mauve crayon over the top of his penis. "You're a bit of a fuckwit, aren't you?" Ned offered amicably. Dwayne looked slapped and the first warning bell had been raised. I started to worry that Ned and Wayne had been assigned a room together for the week. Noel sensed the tension too, so when he suggested settling in and meeting back at the bar, I fully backed him up. A few drinks are great for social lubricant. Soon we were all saddled up at the bar and already in our garbage bags, so we didn't have to go back and get changed later in the night. So far it was just us and the barman, an Irishman named Flannery, who told us he was escaping bad economics back home where the unemployment rate was now sky high. Before this he was area manager of a jewelry store chain, but hard times had led to him being lumbered serving the likes of us. We ordered our first rounds and looked around. The bar was called Ships in the Night and was decked out in a nautical theme and had life buoys, plastic crabs, and netting all over the walls. There was also a wall of shame which showcased photos of people absolutely spastic drunk. One girl had her garbage bag scrunched up around her hips to expose her G-string to the world. Another pic showed a guy vomiting into a pot plant, while one showed a demented red-faced woman who had wrenched all the crabs from the walls and given them a new home in her pants. Enticing. So all in all, the place was tempting enough with its seedy glamour for us to stick around and see what would develop. We had a couple of cleansing libations and our chat started to get more uninhibited and interesting. When I was a child I played with childish things, but now that I am an adult I have pulled them all out. Again, game on. I squawked as I hit up Flannery for another screwdriver cocktail and turned to tell Bry, my son still has so much to learn. I asked him for a screwdriver the other day, but he brought me some sort of tool. "You'll have to educate him, you're a teacher after all," said Ned, stating the obvious while seeming to miss the joke. He returned to puffing his stinky cigar, delighted that Ships in the Night had no smoking restrictions. Behind Ned's shoulder Bry rolled his eyes, which were red and watering a little now from the acrid plumes arising from the cheap toxic Cremosa Cubana brand that Ned was puffing on. Had mentioned they were from Sumatra, and that went some way to explaining their dazzling lack of quality. My guess was that they contained the tobacco scrapings off the factory floor. I watched in fascination as it burned down one side only. Its pre-lighter aroma had reminded me of the smell you get when you wash your dog, and did laughed as I watched it slightly unravel when Ned had cut the head prior to smoking. Had licked the tears down into place, shrugged, and lit up with his Zippo. Upon lighting I noticed a strong dirty diaper odor followed by hints of effluent which he soaked up like a connoisseur, maybe because it gave him happy memories of work. As he approached the halfway point the cigar actually looked embarrassed, each side of the cigar had these little flaps curling out like shrugging shoulders. Not long after that it started to tunnel and almost burned his lips, but it didn't slow him down any. I groaned inwardly when I looked at the open carton by his right hand and saw he had 49 to go. "So how did you and Ned meet?" asked Bry sharply. "Well, we met in Budapest on a Kentucky tour," I started. Ned looked a little bit like a heroin addict when I first saw him, all skinny, dreadlocked, and strung out, so I asked him if he was doing okay. Turns out he was just coming down from a 4-day drinking bender to dull the pain of his recent divorce. Anyway, after the ice was broken, he was a good enough wingman, except for that one night. I abruptly stopped thinking he'd said too much. "This sounds good," piped up Noel, while Wayne nodded absently. He was looking forlornly around the bar while his hand cradled his top pocket, which housed more of his nude en route introduction cards. His other hand adjusted his crotch. The reception clerk must still be busy, I could almost hear him think. I checked with Ned to see if he was cool with me telling the tale, but he was lost in his cremosa vapors, so I dived in. Well, we soon decided to head out for some drinks after our first meeting, as I wanted to keep Ned company on his bender therapy, and we wound up at some girly bar as it was the only place open. Bry raised a disbelieving eyebrow, which I ignored him and plowed on. It was a pretty poor-looking establishment. Ned was hypnotized by this one aging pole dancer on display and quickly starting chatting up a topless waitress while I checked the drinks menu. I thought I must have been reading it wrong, as the drinks were over $50, but it was hard to tell as it was in their currency. Hungary is a member of the European Union, but they have not started with the euro yet. Many places there still expect you to pay in forints, and math has never been my strong point. I handed Ned the menu, which he read in a perfunctory kind of way before proceeding to order a drink from the widely smiling bar girl. "Good times," mumbled Ned through the fog. "It was at the start," I agreed. We absorbed the crumbling ambience of the old place we were in, and took in the show, such as it was, while Ned kept flirting and ordering drinks until it was time to go. I stuck to the water, as I didn't have much money left. When we got up to leave, the bill was astronomical. When I said to the waitress that it couldn't be legal to sell booze at these prices, her eyes got a predatory sheen and she quickly left to get back up. She re-entered the room with 2 hulking brutes. Seems the place was a sting operation and they wouldn't let us leave without paying. Ned didn't have the money but convinced the thugs he had plenty back at the hotel. Long story short, I was used as collateral while he left to get the money. Man, it was the most nervous hour of my life, sitting there under arrest while being eyeballed by those monkeys. Turns out there were double murders at this club the next night too, so it was a close shave. It didn't reassure anyone that when Ned left to go get the cash, he yelled out, "Homeless people gonna make more money than you pricks, who needs this cesspit of karma, drama and dharma, so long suckers." I finished up and sipped what was left of my now warm screwdriver. "They knew that was a joke," came a voice from the vapors. "How'd you take an hour?" Bry queried Ned. "Oh, I met this cool goth chick in the lobby back at the hotel and got distracted." Bry looked incredulous, and even I started wondering if I should have left Ned out of our holiday dream team, as the tension was building like a big cumulonimbus on the horizon. "Hey, what can I say? The sooner you realize life is a chiaroscuro piece of art, the happier you will be," said Ned. "What the hell does that mean?" asked Dwayne. "Just what I said, fool. Life is black and white, up and down, pleasure and pain. It is a dualistic dance, baby. But if you run from the rain, you're never at home for the fun." Ned took his shoes off now, as he always did when stone drunk, and while it shouldn't have been possible, their odor was more overpowering than his cigar fumes. The night progressed, and only 2 more people had turned up, 2 guys who apparently were undercover cops back on the mainland, or so they said. Then just around closing time, one brave girl made her way into the bar and was immediately surrounded by Ned, Bry, and Wayne, drawn to her like bees to honey. Through my alcohol haze I saw a terrified lass in a garbage bag, being simultaneously fumigated by cigar smoke, handed nude cards, and regaled with weird poetry. Make a great pick for the wall of shame, I mused. Give the last dance to me, save the last kiss for me, it is the safest thing to do, slurred Bry in a broken baritone whilst rubbing his nipples. Needless to say, the girl fled into the arms of the night soon after, no doubt heading for the safety and sanity of her duplex. Then the recriminations started and the simmering powder keg of the boys' angst got the spark it needed to ignite. They were at each other's throats before too long and rolling around the floor amidst a flurry of rude cards and grime. I sipped my 9th screwdriver for the night from the safety of the bar and actually started to look forward to returning to work as a substitute teacher as I realized the kids would be better behaved than this. This break had got my head back in the game after all, I thought. Pity I didn't realize the screwdrivers would be missing from the equation back at work. The substitute. I don't like kids, let's get that straight, not many teachers do. And that goes double for when they are sober, the kids that is. It has been scientifically proven that their smaller brains make them irrational, and when you mix in booze it is goodnight nurse. Hell, I'm terrified of them, I'll admit it. Who knows what the little shits will get up to, they confound my reason and leave me in a suicidal mood that can only be eased by drugs, alcohol and other risky behaviors. Just kidding, or am I? Supply teaching isn't a job, it is an adventure. I'm serious though when I say being a sub contains all the worst aspects of the profession with all the sunshiny parts taken out. Good teaching is all about preparation and relationship management, both of which are impossible if you are called up at 5 a.m. and told you are going to yet another school you've never heard of, where the staff and students have never heard of you either, to teach unknown subjects to kids who see you as a day off. A sub has to leapfrog through multiple grades in one day, damaged personalities, shifting curriculums, no lesson plans, locked classrooms, strangers, a lack of authority, new school geography confusion, and a foreign sea of acronyms and policies that swarm like alphabet soup at you when entering each new educational milieu. If you start to get a handle on it, rest assured you'll be moved tomorrow, so it is hard to feel like you're not the butt of a giant practical joke. It's tough, sure, not as hard as coal mining, or as grueling as being a hotel heiress like Paris Hilton, but it is almost as hard as being a regular teacher with the inhuman levels of paperwork and marking schedules that they are saddled with. At least subs get out of that. You thought teaching was about being in a classroom and showing Jack and Gill topics like gravity, but it is mainly about being a psychologist, wrestling referee, coach, comedian, agony aunt, politician, mind reader, oracle, and saint. Being a chauffeur seemed like a safer bet, and I tried to escape into that career only to crash my black Chrysler on the first day of the job. The gold grille was cracked and crumpled after I rear-ended a car that pulled up short going through an intersection so it didn't run into some nut speeding full-on through a red light. So why am I legally responsible here? Following this, I started suffering panic attacks out on the road, especially when boxed in by trucks on a rainy highway, so the Chrysler and I had to part ways. Sad because I could no longer wear a snazzy cap to work, and because it also missed the type of clientele it picked up in the 2 weeks I did the job. They were quite interesting and ranged from shows, rich kids, celebrities, the newly married, tourists, kids on prom night and the dying. My hire company had a government contract under an initiative to give war veterans some dignity on their way to and from hospital appointments. Their horror stories really opened my ears and populated my dreams. Remnants of their conversations would surface within my lunar arena as I navigated corpse-choked rivers and burning villages, always in my big black limo. I learned that there were worse things than being a sub, and so the 2 weeks there weren't a dead loss. Plus they were a holiday from the kids. I tried to extend that holiday with 2 other attempts at alternative lines of work. One job was as a factory hand in the largest distribution center in the Southern Hemisphere. The place looked like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory on the inside with its automation and open-plan level flooring. The warehouse shelving just went up and up. We got so busy at Christmas we broke the world record for most amount of goods shipped out in a single day. My dream vision from a year ago working in this place had come to pass. At the time I didn't understand how numbered loading bays were going to feature prominently in my future, but they did. Like a lot of my visions, they have to come to pass before I know what they truly mean. Any follower of Nostradamus would agree. At least my subconscious was giving me a heads up. Working in the early hours in a giant freezer on slippery floors whilst dodging forklifts was bad enough, but then I got scratched by a ruptured cat food can and my palm needed 8 stitches. It made an ugly scar down my palm in what the doctor referred to as no man's land, and he said I was lucky to not lose my dexterity in that hand. 30 years of guitar playing almost flew out the window, but at least I now have a scar that looks like the papal cross. I lost my nerve to work the following this and took the hint when watching the safety video they showed me upon my return to the factory floor. In it some poor sap was working in a joint just like ours, happily minding his business, when he got backed over by a forklift. They played the loop of the accident to me over and over and over. For me it would be just a matter of time before the same thing happened to me, especially since the place had a 30% staff injury record amongst the long-timers. You could see them bent, broken and plaster casted all around the factory, but they had nowhere else to go. They had to keep on plugging away, manually handling a few ton every night while hopefully ducking out of the way in time when a forklift barreled down on them over the ice during the wee hours. Sure, so I learned that blue-collar work is dangerous, but then low-grade white-collar employment is no picnic either. I tried this last job arc before being dragged back to teaching by the tide of no funds. Somehow it lucked into doing some office administration for the police minister after being placed there by a temp agency. It was a simple gig of screening phone calls to weed out the crackpots in the constituency until one day I got a fateful call. Yeah, I wanna speak to the minister. Sorry, she's not here right now. Tell her it's Parton, now. Unknown to me, he was a senior cabinet member, and obviously expected me to know who he was, but I didn't as it was my first day on the job. I was overwhelmed and green. Be that as it may, she's still out of the building. How about she calls you back? Parton was a union head kicker and had clawed his way up to the top of the pile of ministers of the crown by getting results fast. I was told later by senior department staff that he had a habit of having brain explosions, especially late at night in the parliamentary bar when in his cups. Listen, I don't like your cavalier attitude, you punk. Sorry Parton, I'm not a magician and I can't make her appear out of thin air. What's your message going to be? I trailed off. Suddenly the dead air erupted. I'm gonna gut you like a fish, you hear me? You're dead. You're fired. I'm Minister fucking Parton, you little worm. Click. Head hung up. I blanched. Now the assault had come to an end and I realized who he was. His curt introduction had caught me off guard and it quickly went downhill from there as it thought he was just another punter. At least we weren't on video conferences that would have been hell on wheels, but then on second thought maybe I would have recognized him and avoided my gaffe. Anyway, I was back in the classroom again with my first class after the Mole Island incident. As they streamed in I thankfully noted no one was in garbage bags, swearing, or fighting yet, so the ambience was better than that tragic episode at Ships in the Night. I wished Flannery was here though to keep the cocktails coming. I was going to miss him terribly. Prior to the grade 11 kids walking in I scoped out the room he'd be working in for first period to teach religion. I noticed lots of sexual graffiti and drawings on the walls and desks, as well as announcements like Haley is a slut, Nikki gives great head, and Jeff bang dash. One girl came in undulating her hips like she was riding a pony. I looked away knowing I had to pick and time my battles or my limited cache of authority would be spent and there would be no getting them back after that. I glanced down at my coffee cup wishing it was laced with wild turkey and was grateful that at least Pony Girl wasn't sullen like most of the rest. High spirits can be steered whereas total disengagement and burnout were lost causes and my candy bribes could only go so far. I only had 8 fun-size bars left to hand around. The Bible lesson on magical old King Solomon got underway and was going quite well until I asked Ash a question. So what does the Gnostic Apocalypse of Adam say about the legend in which Solomon sends out an army of demons to seek a virgin who had fled from him? I said in an attempt to get her mind back on track. Yeah, munch, munch, came Ash's garbled reply. I couldn't hear a word of what she was saying as she was talking through a mouthful of pink gum. Mid-sentence she also had the gall to start twirling it out of her mouth and around her ring finger. Holding in my anger I said, "Well, what's it going to be, Ash, spit or swallow?" No sooner were the words out of my mouth than I wished I could have eaten them back up again. There was no coming back from that faux pas and the class was a washout for the rest of the lesson. Solomon and his demon slaves be damned. Don't get me wrong, being a sub wasn't totally bad. There was always the cheap discounted stationery, and the fact that I could wear socks and short pants all year long, and even occasionally get invited to the prom. There's also the small town celebrity I get. When a car drives by and I hear "you suck" being yelled at me by some mop-haired teen. The holidays are also a treat because I get to pick up real money working in a Golden Slumbers and Eventide aged care facilities down the road, which have the added bonus of providing me a place to hone my dark sense of humor. You may gather from what I've experienced that teachers face a losing battle. If you said yes then you're right, here's your gold star. Schools are still set up on an antiquated model left over from the Industrial Revolution when the factories needed workers educated to a minimum degree but still trained to respond to authority. Hopefully the future of education will steer to a system based on cooperation and project work as we are now coming out of the information age and into the imaginational stage of world culture, and more so every day. To compete in a highly computerized and mechanized world market, a major point of difference for many successful companies will be their innovation, and so the corporate drones will need to be more skilled and team-focused. While I'm bitching, I should mention that it doesn't help that teachers are also expected to be entertainers now. We have a younger generation used to constant stimulation and distractions who are the most data-saturated humans in history, always jonesing for their next hit. Just a bunch of funky junky monkeys with their squilly synapses wired weirdly. They are also fed a diet of movies where they are shown it is not good enough to have a good teacher, you need to be taught by a hero. Everyone focuses on how funny or influential the teachers are in movies like Dead Poets Society and To Sir with Love, but they don't dwell on the personal cost those teachers experience. Don't forget that Robin Williams' character Mr. Keating is fired by the school administration while Sidney Poitier's role as Mr. Thackeray shows him continuously baited, and in one scene he even discovers one of the female students has mischievously left a used sanitary towel burning in the classroom grate. I once had one of my students place his cold chisel up to my stomach and menace me during a woodwork class. I've seen fights and even smoke bombs go off, so I can tell you that these movies show you the real deal of how it is. Teachers are also there year in, year out, so even if they get lucky and have a giant win with one special class, they are sure to be thinking, as they watch them walk out the graduation door to triumphant music for a party down the road, that next year they are back to square one. As a sub, this new start reset often happens every day. A sub is frequently replacing a teacher who's off having a mental health day due to the stress from having a bad class. Do you still really expect anyone to give up their life's blood to teach a disinterested teens? As a replacement teacher you're often ignored in the staff room, which may be just as well, otherwise you'll be embroiled in demoralizing snippets such as this one from my personal collection. So who are you? I'm here to replace Mr. Maximilian for Metal Shop. Oh, I'm glad somebody showed up to teach those shitheads. Poor Maxi, he ran out of the building yesterday yelling something about bleeding from his ass, and never again ... never again, says a wispy and overworked colleague who's taken pity on me. Good lord. He sounds demented. No more than usual, but he is tormented by 12B, that's for sure. They never give him an even break. That's nothing though, you just come to expect that from those dipshits, but last week the department had an award ceremony for him. He retiring soon. To reward his service to the mental shop kids for the last 2 decades they gave him a red plastic apple, but then they did spring for some cold quiche and lime Kool-Aid. You're kidding, I said. I wish I was ... He just exploded too. It was a classic. Maxi told the principal to shove his red plastic apple up his fat ass and stormed out of the staff room. Only worked 3 days last month and he hasn't showed up at all this week, and it is his last one. Poor bastard. At least he free soon and never again has to listen to a new administrator who's out to make their mark trying to tell him how to teach with strategies he's already been using for years. They come in and trounce up old tricks and chestnuts with new names. At the last in-service disservice we were told that ignoring and praising kids were now called selective discouragement and parallel acknowledgement. Lucky bastard never has to put up with those retards from admin again. Anyway, good luck with your next mental shop lesson. I left demoralized but with food for thought. Admin was crazy at times, she had a good point, I'd seen it myself. I was once told by them via an email that a directive had come from on high trailing all the way back to the education minister himself. It read: teachers must now quarantine the lowest quartile of performing students in each class and improve the average of said targeted group by 2.32% by the end of August to be in line for an EduBonus. I couldn't believe what I was reading. They were trying to bribe us. Like that's not going to get abused. They were offering fresh temptation for us to use our magic markers to fudge test results. I mused. Teachers always need more money for alcohol, so some will give in and go for it. As a nation we need to ask ourselves if we are making sausages or are we trying to instill culture, character, and real knowledge into our next generation, the true gold of our land, or are we happy with politicians and administrators trying to look good? Sure, they love numbers and I understand that, because unlike life they are clean and neat and easy to manipulate. They are even easier to say and seem to offer irrefutable proof that your policies are working, but to paraphrase the words of the late great Maxi, go take your numbers and shove them up your candid ass. Autistic ashram. Okay, so I realize the last chapter paints me in a bit of a bad light and I could come off as a jerk. We have a sacred bond, you and I, dear reader, due to you handing over your hard-earned shekels to read this, so we'll let you into Santa's workshop and tell you a little secret. If you scored this for free, well done, but it'd be cool if you could leave me a good review on Amazon to balance the scales. I'm just making sure you get your money's worth and trying to get and keep your attention. Remember, I have to punch through the sea of data and images you swim in daily to get my message across. Hopefully in breaking the fourth wall just now by giving you an insight into my P.T. Barnum state of mind, I don't lessen the impact of what I'm saying. What I'm trying to say and show in an entertaining way is that teaching is a sacred profession and teachers should be supported to do what they have been trained to do. There's a reason that over half of the starry-eyed graduates, who have spent so much time and money to enter the profession, leave disillusioned and heartbroken just 5 years later. Again, we need to ask ourselves if this is a problem, and what can be done collectively to fix it. To balance the case before the defense rests, I'd like to tell Your Honor a quirky good news teaching story that maybe points to a future approach. No use bitching about the status quo if you don't offer a better alternative or different vision, and I do have one. Aside from some nice moments where you make a difference or get given your millionth macaroni and glue thank you teacher gift, you also get to learn. The classroom is a great lab to observe humans interacting, which is a real privilege. It is on this ground level that I had a revelation. As a sub you have to be very flexible to survive. One day you are teaching math to grade 12, then art to grade 2. The next day you're looking after autistic children, and that's where you'll get back behind the fourth wall. Let's follow me now to see where my extreme flexibility and post-my astralish headspace leads to. Milford Bonds was like a cross between a hospice, mental asylum and special needs educational unit. They liked me here, I fit right in, and had subbed here for a while. The day was spent feeding gruel to my charges, taking Beth for a spin in her wheelchair, giving the odd lesson, and I do mean odd, and playing football with the spastics. I'm not being mean, that's the correct term. They were spastics, but the team also boasted Down's syndrome, Tourette's and SPs. You can imagine. Here are some snapshots from a typical game. Keep your eye on the ball, I say as Aspie takes me literally and does just that. Sam picks up the ball and puts it on his face. Tourette's girl cheers on the team. What do we want? A goal for our team. Where do we want it? Cunt. I make the mistake of asking the Downy what the score is, and Max tells me it is potato. The cerebral palsy kids stumble around the field like zombie extras in the movie Shaun of the Dead. So you get the idea, madness and meltdowns. After surviving lunch it is time for a math lesson, and it will be murder. I have to lock the doors to stop the Downy running from the room. Gary loves to escape and clamber onto the top of the groundkeeper's shed to then taunt his rescuers. Downies are way stubborn and he refuses to budge once up on his perch. So far he has only broken one arm. His left one is currently rocking a funky blue cast. Thankfully the teacher's aide distracts Gary, who's gone into catatonic mode at being thwarted from a reunion with his shed, so he'll be quiet for a while, hopefully the whole lesson. Happy days, I think, as I move into a games circle with 5 Aspies. At least I do not have to seesaw through a few different disabilities for this lesson. This group is all on the same page, but make no mistake, it is a wild place under the seemingly quiet surface. Autism is not a processing error but more like a different operating system, which makes it hard for normals to understand them. At least it is easy to love them, and sometimes that's all they need. It had only been a month since my time in Virginia, and so my psychic gates were still wide open, as it takes a few months to fully ground and return. I felt like a spaceman coming back from the gateway course and was still getting used to the Earth's mental gravity. In hindsight, maybe it was a mistake to go to San Francisco straight after TMI for a wacky pit stop before embarking to Mole Island, but then it always wanted to see the Golden Gate up close, as well as Alcatraz, the hills, trolley trams and hippies. It booked myself into the urban safari tour to see as much as I could in the one day I had there. Maybe another mistake, talk about sensory overload. I spent the daytime wearing a pith helmet and being carted around in an open-air, zebra-striped, game-viewing safari vehicle. One day if I do go to heaven I'll look around and say it ain't bad, but it ain't San Francisco. So my problem wasn't with the city, it was with me. The helmet, the Jeep, and my raucous and hilarious tour guide made our tour group such a spectacle that we drew everyone's attention, and so waves of energy bombarded me all day long. Exhausting. I still wasn't recovered. This energy transfer works both ways, however. Upon returning from Mole Island, Dad said I was radiating like a Sunday. He was experiencing cyclical blasts from me on a regular basis, just like hits from a rotational lighthouse beam or pulsar star. I could feel it too. I knew he'd become a conduit for higher energy to flow into our plane, but it was nice to have his independent confirmation. He said it felt like love. Scientific research has found that in cities and towns all over the world where as little as 1% of the population practices meditation, the trend of rising crime rate is reversed, indicating increasing order and harmony. Research scientists named this phenomenon of rising coherence in the collective consciousness of the whole society the Maharishi effect. Individual consciousness affects collective consciousness. Nearly 50 scientific research studies conducted over the past 25 years verify the unique effect and wide-ranging benefits to the nation produced by the Maharishi effect. These studies have used the most rigorous research methods and evaluation procedures available in the social sciences, including time series analysis, which controls weekly and seasonal cycles or trends in social data. If interested, Google Scientific Research on Maharishi's Transcendental Meditation Program, Collected Papers 98, 166, 317 320, 331, and 402. Research shows that the influence of coherence created by the Maharishi effect can be measured on both national and international levels. Increased coherence within the nation expresses itself in improved national harmony and well-being. In addition, this internal coherence and harmony generates an influence that extends beyond the nation's borders, expressing itself in improved international relations and reduced international conflicts. For starters, the stock markets stabilize, there is less crime, fewer accidents and better weather. So how can this effect translate on the ground level? Well, I'm glad you asked, because that leads us back to the ASPI game circle where you last saw me. Let's look at how the popular slogan "Think globally, act locally" can become think locally, affect globally. Damien, Celeste, Sue, Ed, Ted, and I sat around a non-confronting grass-green plastic table. We were surrounded by clouds and giant smiling sunflower decals which had been pasted all over the sky-blue walls. Very soothing. The children were all quiet, so I started to read The Hungry Caterpillar, before trying to get them involved in a game. Suddenly I felt some sharp energy shifts as I progressed with telling the story of that fat grub, and I noticed my thinking dilating along with my sense of time and space. What happened next is hard to explain. Probably harder to believe, but I swear it is true. It also highlights why I think often spiritual solutions are needed in education, as the brilliant Austrian teacher, philosopher and esotericist Rudolf Steiner was well aware. It felt like it died. Suddenly I had no ego. This caterpillar had become a butterfly. Their group was now a consciousness collective, but no one seemed to be steering. My input was absorbed by osmosis, so I was along for the ride. It'd been sucked into some kind of hive consciousness or folk soul. I guess reality is what remains when you stop believing in it. The reality of a minute ago now seemed like a fragile dream I had woken up from. I stayed in this altered reality until the APSI kids chose to bring me back. Poets, priests, and philosophers tell us there is an invisible universe within the visible one, a world of causes within the world of effects. There is force within matter, and the two are one, and are dependent for their existence on a third, which is the mysterious cause of their existence. There is a world of soul within a world of matter, and the two are one, and caused by the world of spirit. Well, it is fun to read and ponder such sentiments, but quite shattering to experience them as a living reality. I was beholding the Holy Trinity in action. The only problem is that this experience took years to fully synthesize and understand rationally. At the time it occurred, my mind slid like egg white off a hot vertical Teflon surface. The waking monkey mind has trouble when perceiving multidimensional information, but the dream astral mind has a deeper evolutionary wisdom hidden within it. Your lunar astral consciousness is not hung up on the space-time coordinates or limited logic generated by your solar left brain, but sings to celestial timeless fractal rhythms and pierces to the heart of whatever combined internal, external malleable mind space it is swimming through. If you doubt this, please go and watch neuroanatomist Jill Bolte Taylor recount her brilliant stroke of insight on YouTube right now. https://www.youtube.com/watch V equals a IGU. Dr. Jill had an opportunity few brain scientists would wish for. One morning she realized she was having a massive stroke. As it happened, she felt her brain functions slip away one by one, her speech, movement, and understanding, and she studied and remembered every moment. This is a powerful story about how our brains define us and connect us to the world and to one another. In short, Dr. Jill had her perception flicked from her left to right brain's reality model due to the interference of a brain tumor. The result was that her perception of reality yo-yoed between nirvana and her normal baseline view of the world. Which also raises the question that there is something beyond both mind states, does it not? The greater reality that Jill describes is the one Damien, Celeste, Sue, Ed, Ted and I were now in, and we were all telepathically linked and silently knowing. I was no longer sure what was thought, or what was said, what was done, or what was thunk. I realized that this is how Aspies often communicate, as they didn't play social games. Maybe they couldn't, maybe they wouldn't, and maybe they never realized they should. Their lack of concern for what concerns most of us means their cortexes are freer to play with patterns, as they are not bogged down with the extraneous data generated from keeping people happy. At heart, the universe is information and energetic patterns. It has been proven that the observer can now affect the observed with thought, and this explains why magic is really just another name for energy pattern manipulation. Like computers, the Aspies were computing future probabilities at the speed of light, and so were even further out of touch from their landlocked cousins. Looking at the other staff, I knew what they were going to do, and was only occasionally wrong. Later on, when we were playing games of chance, I was guessing most of the right answers. It was child's play. I just knew. I watched lines of force radiate out from our group into the world. In my heart I felt connected to every person on the planet. Our hearts emitted a powerful frequency which literally encircled the planet. Neurophysicists have recently been astonished to discover that the heart is more an organ of intelligence than merely the body's main pumping station. In fact, these new discoveries include intriguing evidence that more than half of the heart is actually composed of neurons of the very same nature as those that make up the cerebral system. Not only that, but the heart also emits a 5,000 times stronger electromagnetic field than the brain. We are swimming in a sea of hearts. We are discovering, or rediscovering, the true potential of every individual should they begin to live from their heart, rather than solely from their logical mind. Also, we are coming to fully grasp the truth that we are all intimately connected and collectively one. Additional evidence was found to support this truth when researchers looked a little closer and revealed an even more astonishing discovery, that each heart cell is unique in that it not only pulsates in synchrony with all the other heart cells, but also produces an electromagnetic signal that radiates out beyond the cell. In simple terms, we are all energetic information transmitters and receivers. Emotion, or energy in motion, is the carrier wave, and like whale songs that travel thousands of miles, so our emotions and thoughts do too. Over the years I have talked to adult Aspies about my astonishing experience at the gaming table that day, and they have confirmed many things. One fellow told me he never understood why normal people felt the need to have someone in charge. Why did people take turns to talk, and why did he have to slow his mind down to prove to normals what he knew? At first he didn't even realize he was different. When this person learned to give the normals the proof they wanted, he became dux of his school, but he found the process of slowing down and playing social games torturous. How ironic that some Aspies are humoring us while we normals think it is the other way around. Obviously this has an enormous implication for how we educate and structure society. Astral Ashram. School holidays rocked around and it was time for me to hit up Golden Slumbers old age home for some work. Due to a rash of death they didn't need me, so I went scrounging for data entry jobs. I managed to snag a short-term contract at a marketing research firm. The ambience there reminded me of college. While quietly tucked away in the corner tirelessly punching survey data into the computer, I could observe all the young university types. They couldn't hide away like me though. They were on the phones calling folk through their dinners to ask inane questions. This place ran product campaigns, and that are running at the moment were on beef patties and tampons, a natural combo. Only the women were allowed to survey the latter. Swirling around me I'd hear. So you say you prefer a more juicy, meatier patty? Can you describe the texture you like in a patty? So do you insert them with an applicator? What's the most you'd pay for a patty? So tell me what makes for a comfortable fit. Do you go for quality or cheap ones? Please choose a word to describe how they make you feel: carefree, playful, or safe. ... So it is still good on heavy flow days. How would you rate the taste? How many days a month does Aunt Flo come to town? What do you think of the slogan "Have a Happy Period," and do you like the brand name Freedom? That last slogan must have been written by a man amused. It got me to thinking about the funniest commercial I ever saw for a tampon, which was a few years ago and on American TV. It portrayed a mother folding laundry and taking it upstairs to put away. Meanwhile her little boy and his friend are in the little boy's room getting money out of his piggy bank. Mom passes the door on her way to deposit clothes or towels, and she overhears the boys talking and stops to listen. Little friend, so what you gonna buy with all your money? Little boy, some ob tampons. Little friend, why do you want ob tampons? Little boy, cause if you have ob tampons you can go swimming and ride horses and play tennis and go to the beach. It was a weird juxtaposition of topics and conversation snippets in that research center, to say the least. The sheer repetition of a word like patty was hilarious for a while on the first day, but by the second it had become annoying. I even started to dream of patties and tampons after a week there, and the campaign still had a month to go. I wondered if my sanity would hold out. The schoolroom was starting to look good again. In the phone room was a table piled high with every brand of tampon and female hygiene product you could imagine. I wasn't really sure why this shrine was there, but just accepted that the ladies on the campaign knew. This pyramid of winged napkins and colorful boxes was set to topple any minute. It had been amusing though when Nikki had entered the room earlier in the day carrying 8 full shopping bags of product. During our coffee break she told me the man who served her at the cash register in the shop had been speechless. I said, no doubt he was thinking, now there goes a heavy flow, that girl be rollin', like, Superflow, which cracked Nikki up. Since I got a good reaction I said, stop me if you've heard this one, Nikki. A black brother was wandering along an alleyway in Harlem when he almost tripped over an old silver lamp lying on the floor. He stopped, bent down and picked it up. The lamp was extremely dirty, so he wiped it vigorously with his sleeve. There was a big bang and a blast of purple smoke which cleared to reveal a genie. In the best tradition the genie announced himself and went through the 3-wish routine. Our hero thought carefully before giving his answer. Man, I'd like to be all white, uptight, and out his sight. So the genie turned him into a tampon. The moral of this story: never do deals with a genie, there's always strings attached. Nikki just laughed and punched me in the arm. With coffee break over we returned to the grind. After keying in data for a few hours every day I noticed an interesting phenomenon occurring once my surface mind was fully occupied. Guess that's why they get monks to do all those menial jobs. It was like my experience with the Aspie kids at the game table, only this time I had the time and space to observe and learn how to steer this more slowly unfolding process. With the Aspies I was strapped to the nose cone of a rocket and blasted into deep space, but here I was more like a jet pilot in the upper stratosphere. Quantum physics string theory currently numbers our universe as having 23 dimensions above the current 3 that we perceive with our senses. These other dimensions are elegantly folded up into our 3D world. What are they therefore, and can we ever know? Judging from how the majority of our brain isn't used, and our supposedly junk DNA, it seems Mother Nature really loves to create useless extravagance. Not likely. Maybe this says more about our species' level of evolution and understanding than it does about the grand plan. Any shaman worth his peyote will tell you that as your energy changes and increases, you can open up this origami puzzle we call life and peer through the cracks. The simplest analogy to explain this is water, which can be ice, fluid or vapors. This shows how matter and your environmental properties can easily change and expand. In this case the medium of water alters because the temperature, or energy, is raised. A medicine man, guru, or high priest can raise their energy by various methods and become a conduit for healing and wisdom. They expand out and align themselves with sympathetic coherence to the order of the higher dimensions where pure archetypal blueprints for nature are stored. It has been said that knowledge leads to action, but that it takes action to complete knowledge. The Aspie revelation had given me knowledge but no wisdom, but now I was learning to steer the cyclone of energy that was around me. Albeit this happened at first in an organic, instinctual kind of way, but the older I get the more rational sense it makes to me and the more controllable it becomes. Good thing you don't need to know how a car works to be able to drive it, if you get my drift. What you don't yet know you can feel, and what you can't see with your imagination and third eye you can intuitively perceive and contemplate. In this light and spirit I'll poetically describe my revelations at the Market Research Center. Not because I can't find words for the experiences, but for the reason that the images and phrases can resonate with your soul more fully. This will be of more benefit than my dry scientific explanations. There's plenty of follow-up material for you at the end of the book in the suggested reading section if this is your bent. There's enough that most of you dear readers will have to kiss goodbye to the rest of your decade to plow through it all. I just hope you didn't have a lifer planned. If you're still stuck, feel free to email me. I may be able to steer you into some good avenues that you could find are worth your time exploring. I offer this free service because I know how traumatic spiritual awakening can be and wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. A little bit of knowledge can do wonders for your sanity. For example, one lady at my Stargate activation meditations came to me on Valium because she was freaking out and headed for a breakdown. Turns out she just didn't understand what was happening to her after she experienced spontaneous out-of-body experiences. It didn't take much to reassure and calm her down, or to teach her how to make this process repeatable and under her control, but more on that later. I don't have all the answers, but I got some. Waves of positive, negative, neutral, and higher love swirl, while the enigmatic egos choose their stream. Some souls scream, I'm not entitled to such extravagance of concept. To stay and satanically cling to lower earthbound orbits. Others house the goddess to fly to the sun, through the eye of the mind, to the unknowable black hole that exists beyond escape velocity and to the right side of the ring pass not. The navigator sits keying data and being the charioteer. He seeds some souls for future linkages, and spins others into higher, spiral evolutions. The word is law, what is accomplished in Godhead will unfold as preordained. Souls will be swept along incandescent columns of firelight along with those who have graduated to higher chains. The sun god current will carry them along now they are hitched. If they maintain the integrity of their orbs they will travel faster and smoother. If not, the ride will get rough, but they will still be carried in the turbulent slide of the jet stream. What they don't balance can become physical sickness or karmic lessons, and the lies the cosmic safety net and promise. Thoth smiles and farms the room, Shiva nods, and Indra radiates. Metatronic current is granted anchoring rights amongst the fastest soul vessels. The higher solar rhythm comes to those who are willing to wear the crown of thorns, those who are contracted to fractally compress star systems and move through stargates to navigate the Jacob's ladder of corrections from Kabbalistic partitions. Screens of ego, and higher ego, and yet more subtle ego veil and bounce and anchor the soul between spirit and terror. Spiral up and down. Goddess Nikki, how high you now climb, priestess of Athena. I witness and salute you. You've made the grade, your hair is alive and you swim the seas. We link black hole consciousness. The female and male, androgynous and powerfully divine once more. The minor descent has led to the major ascent. The crowned lady has her foot on the moon serpent's head, and the babe is in her arms. Polarity suspended. There is no saint without a past and no sinner without a future. Babaji whispers telepathic encouragement to the hive mind. The masters are only supernatural because others were not. I surf the ghouls at the entrance to the gates of the dead, past the guardians, to be a messenger for the gods. I barely hold on to my I give in, and accept and trust that my identity on the rainbow-hued hive bubble will be remembered as a thought form of light awaiting my return from the void, like a comfortable pair of slippers by the door. My data entry becomes a weaving of spells as the characters become receptacles for the living word, the lightning sephira of seraphim fire ensconced like a snail in its shell, to reverberate between Kether and Malkuth. Matter Mother masks and transforms the electromagnetic arc down to an earthable level. We surf the sphere of magic potentiality where higher dimensional versions of reality are fluid prior to crystallization. Different humans play various pivot points and metaphoric roles for the cosmic interplay. The Trinity laughs and ceaselessly works toward the blissful goal of glory as a creation, same as it ever was. The lords of Saturn, of form, alchemically work for the sun lords of flame, and Malkuth is the dough worked between them, to become a living bread. A transmutable energy the cosmos craves. All action becomes ritual, as the sun orange is peeled for lunch. The principal law of correspondence uses the mist aroma to remove karma. Genetic heritage of astral determinism is overruled by the law of love as the endgame template is fused ever deeper into matter, overriding the false ego freedom of the crocodiles. Krishna offers the higher spiral dance beyond lower heart triple attractions. Each new reality is its own religion. Leave your sitcom for the celestial vision. Intensely relaxed into the multiverse spectral confluence, I dance with Deva and hold on to nothing. Integration or disintegration, the line is fine, the gold heart compass leads to the palace of trust. There is nothing to be gained except awareness of what already is. Complexities arose because soul joy was forgotten, and people accept fleeting substitutes. All things must evolve back to their bliss source. The Orion magnetic geometry embeds the new initiate's body with the recurring magnetism of star births. Sirius and Pleiades implosive phi-based dodeca waves non-destructively balance into a perfectly branching algorithm of fractality braided into our living DNA. O Lord of the universe, I see you endowed with numerous arms, bellies, faces and eyes, and having infinite forms extended on all sides. O form universal, I see neither your beginning, nor middle, nor end. Only fear inhibits this expression of love. Forgive the fear, love the fear, and then send it on its way. Love rises like a rose amongst thorns. Out of the few near-death experiences I've had, God didn't send me back from heaven so I could make more money. It is only ever for the special mission of love, or to help others. You have to die a few times before you can really live. Let me off at the top. Magic Mike, Kit and I took a much-needed break. Mike from high-level arc welding and wizard duties, Kit from his uni students and druidic responsibilities, and me from the astral ashram. We had all gone through Kabbalah school together back in the day. The 7 years we spent at the Inner Knowledge College of Divinity had forged an astral bond between us that still operates to this day. I can't count the number of times our lives have synced up. It is beautiful to watch, and even better to experience. All of us have gone on to teach spirituality as we have a strong commitment to our attunement with the universe and to helping others become in tune too. If a pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work, then we are well on our way to becoming masters. It feels like Christmas time when the three of us get together, and today was no exception, and before long we were working our organic magic. We were climbing Mount Warning, known as Wombin, or the Cloud Catcher to the Aboriginals, which is in the Northern Rivers region of New South Wales, near the border of my home state of Queensland. It is the first place on mainland Australia to receive the sun's rays each day. Over 60,000 people a year make the 8.8 kilometers, 5-hour round-trip trek to the top. We had chosen today to climb as there was an auspicious new moon whose date of occurrence marked it as the Shiva moon. This is because it is occultly known as the most opportune time to banish the remaining crescent of your mind, which then leads to full enlightenment. To become a mastermind you just need no mind, or in Buddhist terms big mind. The mountain remains a place of special spiritual, cultural and traditional significance to the indigenous traditional owners, the Bundjalung people, and is the site of particular ceremonies and initiation rites. The Bundjalung observe cultural and traditional restrictions forbidding the uninitiated from climbing the mountain, and, as such, generally ask that others also do not attempt to climb the mountain, and in hindsight I can see why. If the place was overseas it would be fenced off and have an ashram built at its base. It does boast the only Sai Baba temple in Queensland though. Following my climb to the top I experienced a period of wonder and rapid growth which was startling. I'll explain later about how I danced with the dweller on the threshold. We started our trek under the cover of the night. The journey up was also a journey within, as the mountain is literally a crystal dynamo which creates thin veils between the realms. I sent a silent request to the Bundjalung ancestral spirits for permission and was surprised at what my torchlight disclosed when it immediately fell upon a tree. The illumination showed a marking of a black elder pointing the way up the mountain with his spear. I accepted this as a sign that we were good to go. Right up Australia's answer to the Kemina Trail. As we progressed higher I noticed the encroachment of sprites, nature spirits and aboriginal guardians. They say a picture speaks 1,000 words, so now for your viewing pleasure here's some happy snaps taken from the mountain. The first picture shows me and my old buddies, who responds to your thought requests by the way, and is taken pre-dawn as our white brotherhood ascended the mountain, chanting all the way. Many spirit protectors and guides can be seen here for those with the eyes to see. Is that an angel kneeling in front of the sun being? It helps to see it in color and blown up, I grant you. But check out below my hip on the right. What else can you see? The following series of photographs show me practicing Kriya Yoga on the mountain top. I used breathing exercises and eye control to direct the rainbow serpent earth energy up from the ground to my Ajna center, and from there it was up and out to the celestial penthouse. You can see the earth energy, as a violet vesica pisca shape containing a gold triangle, as it makes its way through my throat chakra and up to my third eye, where it seems to form an Egyptian ben, the ancient symbol for eternal life, and also the sacred image for the son of the Sunday. If you look at the fourth picture, my hair seems to transform into a cobra, and is that a gold bird head above it as a tutelary spirit? Looks like the gold Egyptian pharaoh funeral mask of Tutankhamun, doesn't it? Archetypes never sleep or age, it seems. The second last photo is where the camera gives up the ghost and bows under the celestial radiance of my solar halo. Just kidding. The last pic shows the three brothers at play. From left to right is me, Kitten Magic Mike. That night around the campfire we had a joke competition as we passed the bourbon around. The booze and the magnesium oil helped soothe our sore muscles after the big climb. It is a long trek and at the end it gets sheer as you have to haul yourself up with a slippery chain. We deserved to celebrate, as even the gods were happy. Magic Mike went first. So this guy dies and goes to heaven. It is a slow day for Street Peter, so, upon passing the entrance test, Street Peter says, "I'm not very busy today, why don't you let me show you around?" The guy thinks this is a great idea and graciously accepts the offer. Street Peter shows him all the sights, the golf course, the reading room and library, the observation room, the cafeteria, and finally they come to a huge room full of clocks. The guy asks, "What's up with these clocks?" Street Peter explains, "Everyone on Earth has a clock that shows how much time he has left on Earth. When a clock runs out of time, the person dies and comes to the gates to be judged." The guy thinks this makes sense but notices that some of the clocks are going faster than others. He asks why is that? Street Peter explains, "Every time a living person tells a lie, it speeds his clock." This also makes sense, so the guy takes one last look around the room before leaving and notices one clock in the center of the ceiling. On this clock, both hands are spinning at an unbelievable rate. So he asks, "What's the story with that clock?" "Oh, that, Street Peter replies, "that's O.J. Simpson's clock. We decided to use it as a fan. We rolled around and had a good laugh at that one, and Magic Mike was pleased with the reaction." Not to be outdone, Kid took a swig of Maker's Mark and launched into his offering. So this husband and wife were out enjoying a round of golf and were teeing off on the third hole, which was lined with beautiful homes. The wife hit her shot and the ball began to slice. Her shot was headed directly at a very large plate glass window. Much to their surprise, the ball smashed through the window and shattered it into a million pieces. They felt compelled to see what damage was done and drove off to see what happened. When they peeked inside the house, they found no one there. The husband called out and no one answered. Upon further investigation, they saw a gentleman sitting on the couch with a turban on his head. The wife said, "Do you live here?" "No, someone just hit a ball through the window, knocked over the vase you see there and freed me from that little bottle." "I am so grateful," he answered. The wife said, "Are you a genie?" "Oh, why yes I am. In fact, I am so grateful I will grant you 2 wishes, the third I will keep for myself," the man replied. The husband and wife agreed on 2 wishes. One was for a scratch handicap for the husband, to which the wife readily agreed. The other was for income of $1 million per year forever. The genie nodded and said, "Done." The genie now said, "For my wish, I would like to have my way with your wife. I have not been with a woman for many years, and after all, I have made you a scratch golfer and a millionaire." The husband and wife readily agreed. After the genie and wife were finished, the genie asked the wife, "How long have you been married?" To which she responded, 3 years. The genie then asked, "How old is your husband?" To which she responded, 31 years old. The genie then asked, "And he still believes in this genie stuff?" A belly laughs echoes around the campfire. I took a pull of hooch, and then stepped up to bat. Listen up you two, here comes the bomb, and winning entry. One fine day, a guy was out golfing and got up to the 16th hole. He teed up and cranked one. Unfortunately, it went into the woods on the side of the fairway. He went looking for his ball and came across a little guy with a huge knot on his head and the golf ball lying right beside him. "Bless me," said the golfer, who then proceeded to revive the poor little guy. Upon awakening, the little guy said, "Well, you caught me fair and square. I am a leprechaun. I will grant you 3 wishes. I can't take anything from you." The man said, "I'm just glad I didn't hurt you too badly," and walked away. Watching the golfer depart, the leprechaun thought, well, he was such a nice fellow, and he did catch me, so I have to do something for him. I'll give him the 3 things that any man would want. I'll give him unlimited money, a great golf game, and a top sex life. A year passed quickly and the same golfer was out golfing on the same course at the 16th hole. He hit one into the same woods and went off looking for his ball. Just as he found it, he saw the same little guy and asked how he was doing. "I'm fine," the leprechaun said, "and might I ask how your golf game is?" "It is great." The golfer said, "I hit under par every time." "I did that for you," responded the leprechaun, "and might I ask how your money is holding out?" "Well, now that you mention it, every time I put my hand in my pocket, I pull out $100 bill," he replied. The leprechaun smiled. "I did that for you. And might I ask how your sex life is?" Now the golfer looked at him a little shyly and said, "Well, maybe once or twice a month." Floored, the leprechaun stammered, "Once or twice a month?" The golfer looked at him sheepishly and said, "Well, that's not too bad for a Catholic priest in a small parish." We howled till we cried that night, but we never did decide who told the best joke. Throughout the night we all commented on the strange flashes in the sky. It was a perfect cloudless night, so we were stumped as to where the sheet lightning was coming from. My guess was that the atmosphere here was so highly charged from the ring of crystal mountains that it was occasionally discharging due to energy overload. So that mystery was solved, but none of us could explain away the dancing stars and UFOs we saw. The next morning we made our way into the local town of Uki, which is only a short distance from Mount Warning, and it is easy to see the holy effect this mountain has had on the locals. If inner beauty is a greater recommendation than any letter of reference, then the townsfolk of Uki need no introduction. Every person we passed seemed to be a bigger character than the last one. I felt like I was in a movie and Lord Shiva was playing all the parts. "You can't fool me on a good day, Shiva, cause then I can see through all your masks," and today was a prince of a day. We stumbled into the town hall to get a feed and the locals were all singing and dancing. Apparently it was a lady's 77th birthday, but maybe it was to celebrate the White Brotherhood's return. We joined in the dancing and felt like we were in heaven. It was just another perfect day for the triad. I realized for the first time since my divorce that I was feeling great. Just because life hadn't given me what I thought I needed, it still seemed determined to give me a happy ending. What is terrible is not death, or the death of a dream, but the lives people live or don't live up until their death, and I was coming to realize that I have had an amazing one. My magic brothers had spun me to an orbit I could never have arrived at on my own, and for that I am forever grateful. It has been said if you keep a hero going long enough he can become a god, or in my case a minor godling starseed. If that sounds grandiose and delusional to a Charles Manson kind of level, I offer you the following caveat. You're one too, you just don't know it yet, but one day you will. I guess I'd better explain, and to do that I'll have to back up. Is the Mothman me? My older brother Jay and I both saw the Shadowman, but on different nights. We were 7 and 5 and shared a room down the back of the house. The first night's sighting had him running to our parents' bed for comfort, and the second saw me curling up under the covers. I peeked out from under them. He was still there. Definitely a man. How can I see him? There's just black against black. My mind screamed. The Shadowman had on a bowler hat and he held a device in his left hand. The hat should have tipped me off that a sense of humor may have been lurking in there somewhere. Somehow he instantly moved from the end of my bed and now flickered right beside my head. In terror I punched my chubby little fist into the specter's stomach and was rewarded with a soft sensation like you would get from hitting a pillow, and then the form dissipated. The next night my younger sister Megan encountered what she called the umbrella ghost. Following that, the Matheson clan was left alone and all paranormal activity ceased, for a while. Amityville Horror this tale isn't, but it was shocking enough that it lived on in our collective family memory, where it remained firmly lodged as a mystery. Puberty saw the return of this phenomenon for one night. This time the Shadowman was not alone. He had two robed silhouettes along for ride. One had a universe where its face should have been and the other had on a strange mask. It was precisely black on the left side and white with 9 holes on the other. Strangely I held my ground this time. There also appeared to be a living energy mandala portal which morphed above their heads in swirls of mesmerizing midnight blue. The masked being telepathed to me that I had been selected, and then they phased out from my field of vision. I didn't see them again for over 10 years. After this visitation, a fascination with mysticism was ignited in me, and this led to me developing psi abilities such as learning how to astral travel, so I didn't have to wait for them to come to me. It was a long time between drinks otherwise, maybe because time passed quicker for them. A number of religions, legends, and belief systems describe shadowy spiritual beings or supernatural entities such as shades of the underworld, and various ethereal creatures have long been a staple of folklore and ghost stories. Shamans work with such beings daily to earn their bread and butter, and they can use their allies for good or evil, healing or murder, or just to find out who stole the village chicken. It was Doug the dog, the real jerk that way, but then he not himself when he hungry. Participants in online discussion forums devoted to paranormal and supernatural topics range from describing these beings as menacing, to helpful, or neutral. Some even speculate that shadow people may be the extra-dimensional inhabitants of another universe. It is also possible that the current urban legend of Slender Man and even the Men in Black could be linked to the Shadow Man. If they are real, then many questions are raised. What are they? Are they energy vampires? Are they voyeurs or tourists? Can they be banished? Some theories say they are ghosts, others say interdimensional beings, or time travelers. If they are interdimensional beings or time travelers, there may not be much we can do to get rid of them, because they would presumably have their own agendas and reasons for showing up, and a form of technology so advanced to ours that they appear magical. If you are having troubling visitations, by the way, you could try sage smudging your house, as shaman have long used this technique successfully to help clear the psychic atmosphere their ceremonies are conducted in. Sage burning is also used to move on the spirits of the recently departed. Running water and salt and other folk remedies can provide barriers, and there are books which explain such psychic defense at length. I however have found that a wholesome life combined with understanding leads to a calm inner strength which is far more effective in navigating and steering these phenomena than what can be achieved by ineptly interacting with them. The reason for this is not a simplistic one. Over many years I have come to understand that these inorganic beings represent a far more complex symbiosis, a kind of mirror, where the internal and external worlds are fused at a very deep and intimate level, and this process deepens and changes over time as you burn off your karma. Understanding the process speeds it up. Over the years my Shadowman has morphed to become positive and more animated, but it still retains its alien vibe, and this pushes me right up to the edge of my comfort zone where deep healing can occur. During our last meeting they were holding stars. I'm waiting with bated breath to see what they run up to when I'm 70. It has long been said in occult circles, and also in myth, that an initiate or hero has to face certain tests, battles and initiations. An example is Hercules and the 12 labors the gods gave him to see if he was worthy to become like them. From ancient recesses of ancestral memory, and from an individual's subconscious, there emerges an astral vision which is the sum total of all instinctual tendencies, of all inherited glamours, and of all phases of wrong mental attitudes. To these is given the famous occult name Dweller on the Threshold. This dweller is the sum total of all the personality characteristics which have remained unconquered, which must be finally overcome before progress into higher realms is allowed. This is just as well, otherwise we would have a lot of Darth Vaders instead of Yodas running around, and the universe can't have that. In my experience, when you recognize yourself as the dweller, the fight is on. This highly animated thought form is a shapeshifter and can even appear to the observer as something physical, and also during the daylight. Fairy lore abounds with tales of travelers who were led into whole kingdoms that they believed to be fully real. Some even claimed to live in these realms for a length of time. Their physical body may have been rolling around in a muddy moor somewhere, but their astral body had taken flight with their ego to lands unknown. In our current day Yetis, UFOs, Men in Black and Mothman have all taken on this ancient role, and I believe them all to be linked and expressions of the same process of consciousness cleansing evoked by contact with the Dweller. Mothman is a good case in point. It is a legendary moth-like creature reportedly first seen in the Point Pleasant area of West Virginia from 15 November 1966 to 15 December 1967. The first newspaper report was published in the Point Pleasant Register dated 16 November 1966, titled, "Couples See Man-Sized Bird. Creature. Something." Virginia turns out to be one of the top 3 psychic hotspots in the world. Many other people have reported similar sightings there since then, and John Keel has done a brilliant job of investigating them. Truth be told, weirdness was probably always going down there, but it just wasn't reported. His 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies, was Keel's account of his investigation into sightings of this huge, winged creature. The book was widely popularized as the basis of a 2002 film of the same name starring Richard Gere. The interesting thing he discovered is that when someone is seeing the Mothman, his neighbor will be experiencing a poltergeist, while across town there are Yeti and UFO sightings going down. His research uncovered that these things always occur together. Mothman appears to be a messianic-style, archetypal deity. The Buddhists call it the Garuda, but it is called by different names in different countries. Birds are more connected to the supernatural than any other animal. The Garuda has several different tasks he is apparently involved in, most having to do with regulating the airwaves of the superspectrum. He is drawn to the activity of other supernatural creatures and dark forces, as a first responder, which explains his appearances at certain places and times. Another role of the Garuda is to stabilize the minds of humans as they advance on the evolutionary scale, both personally within a lifetime and societally over time. Keel's later book, Flying Saucer to the Center of Your Mind, initially sought to explain UFOs as extraterrestrial visitations, but later abandoned this hypothesis, and he used the term ultraterrestrials to describe UFO occupants he believed to be non-human entities capable of taking on whatever form they want. These beings aren't from outer space but exist in the higher dimensional superspectrum all around us. Normally our narrow sense-based perceptual band of awareness screens them out. However, when a UFO flap, or wave, occurs every few years, then the silly season starts and all the groovy ghoulies come out to play. From the hundreds of cases he studied, he noticed certain characteristics popping up in those who had experienced contact. Guess what? I tick every box a contactee can. I am of Celtic origin, have red hair, am left-handed, have been to Virginia, where I studied at the Monroe Institute, have taken LSD, am a teacher, I work with disabled people and also special needs children, am a long-term meditator, and my family has a history of paranormal activity occurring around them. I've told you already how my family encountered the Shadowman, but we also have had UFO activity around us. One day in my childhood, while playing at the beach at noon with my cousins, we all became aware that bright star-like shapes were doing crazy maneuvers in the sky. They'd speed up, stop on a dime, and do hairpin turns, and did so for hours. That night we called the Air Force to ask what was going on, but they hadn't seen anything, or were keeping mum about it. So let's say these phenomena are real, or real enough. What should be our response? Again, the answer is not a simple one. I don't believe the response should be any external action, but instead be an internal, inner alchemical working that ultimately each individual has to undertake alone. That's why a book like this one can be an invaluable sanity-saving device. When you confront the Dweller, as one day you must, and your intelligence, feeling and will splinters, and you feel the death fear from being trapped in a maze of your own making. It helps to know others have survived this baptism of fire. You've reached a key spot on your evolutionary ladder where you need to clean up your act so you can leave the nursery with your free will and creative powers blazing as you rise up star-like into your destined home of higher dimensional reality. So don't panic just because these guys may soon be playing in a bedroom near you. White Light Tour. I mentioned in the last chapter how you don't have to wait for the dweller to come to you. In fact, it'll be easier for everyone if you're proactive. The Buddhists have been practicing dream yoga, or astral traveling, for thousands of years with this view in mind. My first technique that helped me achieve conscious projection was to be way hungover. I don't recommend it, but it was tequila if you're determined to replicate my process. You're welcome. Hovering in a subliminal state during my recovery, I slowly noticed my head and stomach had stopped pounding. Then I remembered that I'm not normally a revolving ball floating above my body. Suddenly I was sitting out of body, known as a bee. In the form I'm more accustomed to and had reassumed out of habit. For a second it blanked out but then had come to and was now fully separated. But for a brief moment I was a tabula rasa and forgot where, who and what I was. The crease thought form returned soon enough to remind me what my current lifetime accumulation of experience was. Looking around my bedroom I noticed it was back to front before I popped back into my physical shell which had been patiently holding my hangover for me. The second I had occurred on purpose. I was halfway through the brilliant program by Robert Bruce called Mastering Astral Projection in 90 Days. I had laid down 5 minutes ago and was running through my exercises when I saw Jesus was at the foot of my bed. Strangely, he was the California surfer dude Jesus and not the Hebrew desert dweller version he should have been to be authentic. Those shapeshifters are real trickster spirits. As he felt like a very positive entity, I asked him what he wanted. He held out his hand in invitation, and as I inwardly acquiesced I felt my crown chakra being given a quick tune-up, and a few laser pin pricks later I was on my way. I was in a thought-responsive room now, but JC was nowhere to be seen. The place had the feel of a holding pen or nursery crib and was decked out with things for me to play with and test my new senses and abilities. Quickly getting bored of flying and playing with 70H dimensional toys and mobiles, I noticed a light gate in the room which I passed through as soon as I willed to do so. Out in space now I looked down on a hexagram network that reminded me of honeycomb. Each well contained a different reality system, and I sensed they were somehow linked and mixed together to harvest the ambrosia for the gods. Beyond space itself I could also feel concentric realities whose design reminded me of those nested Russian dolls. The current space was just a metaphor like everything else, and the ability to go deeper was infinite. Suddenly I was back in astral land and JC was escorting me through the land of dreamers towards my body. "Will I see you again?" I asked. "Of course," said Surfer Christ, winking at me. "What wisdom do you have to bestow on me? As you sow in your subconscious mind, so shall you reap in your body and environment. Whatever your conscious mind assumes and believes to be true, your subconscious mind will accept and bring to pass. Whatever you habitually think sinks into the subconscious. The subconscious is the seat of the emotions and is a creative mind. Once subconscious accepts an idea, it begins to execute it. Whatever you feel is true, your subconscious will accept and bring forth into experience. That's heavy, Jesus. Tell me about it. Oh, I should also tell you why there's good and evil. I've heard you wondering about it. Yeah, you got me, JC, I've always wondered about that. Seems way unfair and random. Well, it is harsh but never random, my child. Short answer is that free will creates the possibility for evil, but you deserve some more details. You're a good egg. Prior to your Earth incarnations, your soul group was blissfully at one with creation but lacked freedom. They chose to come to the school of magnetic response, or the house of pain to some, earth to others, to pretend to be separate from the all so that when they returned to source they could maintain the imprint of individuality whilst still being connected to all. They were blending into their hive mind distinct personalities, or spiritual egos if you prefer. That creates the ultimate hit. You were just looking at your soul group's home to which you'll return bearing many gifts. No worries though, as it won't be for a while, but you may want to slow down on the butter. Seriously, your cholesterol is sky high, and it's destined to take you down in the end. Would you be amused to learn that many spirits consider Earth graduates in the highest regard for the gravity they harvest on Terra? It generates increased individuality, which is a transferable gift that others also get to enjoy for eternity. Of course, graduates get a bigger taste of this, which is only fair as they made the pie, so to speak. So you're saying we all have a happy ending, but in the meantime we can't make an omelette without breaking some eggs? I said a little sarcastically. Jesus laughed. You always were funny. Yes, that's the gist of it, but feel free to drop off your improved universe designs if you have any in my suggestion box. I'm all ears and maintain an open door policy. Let me sleep on it, JC. I'll get back to you. But I'll give you a teaser. In my universe, parking fines and jobs are gonna be toast. We were nearing my body and I could feel it reeling me in the closer I got to it. Opening my eyes, I remembered it all, right from the time I lay down my head and up to now. I had not had a break in consciousness at all. Amazing that we don't have to go to sleep just because our bodies do. How ironic that everyone astral travels every night, and also returns to source, but they don't remember it upon waking. You need regular contact with the source for your inner bodies to recharge, otherwise you'll soon be dead. By the end of the 90-day program I got to consciously surf up to the source, and it remains one of the highlights of my life. The ultimate high. I became lucid in the astral and was being instructed by a monk guide on a specific spiral energy exercise. It was like the astral jumps done in the movie Inception. As I executed this, he helped out and suddenly twin rainbow serpents blew my awareness up out of my astral spine and I exploded into the clear white void. There was no separation. Now as all was one. The One is infinite, eternal, all-knowing, and omnipresent. The One is groovy. Strangely, it knows everything without thinking specific content, in the same way that once you've read a book you know all about it. It is only if you want to relive a particular part again that you then have to dip into time and space to read the page you're interested in. The white light feels very natural and blissful when you experience it, as natural as a baby resting in its mother's arms, except you are both at the same time. You are the light. Words fail here, but I'll say it again, the feeling is totally natural. In fact, I forgot I was ever anything else. The possibility of an alternative was not even on my radar. It wasn't long after being born again into the light that I became aware that he'd come under the protective wing of the great Guru Sai Baba. I started chatting to him in the astral, where he showed me how all is just a mask for the white light, which is known as the Atmic consciousness in the Indian culture. I knew very little of him outside of what I garnered from our following nighttime rendezvous, but was aware that some scandal swirled around him and that a few considered him to be a clown in a gown. I googled him and read that he'd never been charged with anything. Never one to believe in gossip, and also having a slight journalistic streak that I inherited from my father, I made contact with the local chapter in Australia. I then proceeded to speak personally with devotees who had gone all the way to Sikh ashram in Puttaparthi to meet him. No matter what is said about Sai, I found his followers to be very sweet mangoes indeed. They were the closest to a real Christian fellowship that I've ever experienced. If you had to judge a tree by the fruit it creates, then Sai was doing well. I heard of many of his miracles from them, none of which impressed me terribly, as that was not what had magnetically drawn me here. I was more interested in learning what people made of him when they met him physically. I was interested in his character. The short answer is that incredibly sweet, but can be firm, has a great sense of humor, an energy and aura that can be seen and felt for miles, and knows all about those who come to see him. While I have had many special experiences with Sai, I'll relate one special tale which speaks volumes. I met up with Sai in the astral and he was speaking to me with a ridiculous Indian accent. It was so thick that I couldn't understand him and I started to laugh. "Ah, what's up with that crazy voice, Sai?" Suddenly he switched to perfect English and told me the following. "You were born into a state of grace. It is impossible for you to leave it. You will die in a state of grace whether or not special words are spoken for you, or water or oil is poured upon your head. You share this blessing with the animals and all other living things. You cannot fall out of grace, nor can it be taken from you. You can ignore it. You can hold beliefs that blind you to its existence. You will still be graced but unable to perceive your own uniqueness and integrity, and blind also to other attributes with which you are automatically gifted. Always remember that God is in everyone. God loves everybody. God is in you, and you are God. Love all, serve all." Following that we started to observe two playful cats dancing in the white light and the lucid dream faded out. The very next night I was talking to a devotee I'd been directed to speak to ask her about how her interview with Sai in Puttaparthi went down. Well, he felt like my grandfather, which is odd considering he Lord of the universe and all, but I felt like I'd always known him. I'd been waiting for days to see him and finally our group from Australia was granted an interview. A real honor because he has millions of visitors from all over the world clamoring for his attention. When he came to speak to me his voice suddenly changed from speaking fluent English to a comedic Indian accent with broken phrases. I could barely understand a word he was saying. Then he turned to a doctor in our group, switched back to his perfect English and proceeded to diagnose his patients back in Australia using proper medical terminology. I still don't know why he did this. When I explained the dream I had the night before with the avatar, she laughed and said that was typical Sai and explained it all. Very playful he is. And I have observed him frequently giving what appeared to be cryptic instructions only to have the meaning revealed clear as crystal further down the line. This highlights his impressive omniscience which he claims to possess, and which he states we all do as we are godlings in training. Most just don't realize it yet. It makes sense that if we can reach up into our divine natures then there will be other spirits already further down the track than us. Personally I'll take any help I can get and am very grateful to Sai for his sometimes subtle, but always spot-on, guidance. The God Spell of Street. Kreese, Extreme Priest. Thanks for following me all this way. It has been quite a trip for both of us. We started out together with you seeing me as a wreck but now I seem to be verging on sainthood. That shows there's hope for us all. When the time comes for me to be canonized though you should mention that I did once try to become a priest, which should score me some brownie points. A couple of years after my divorce I called up Banio Seminary in Queensland and talked to the chief recruiter Cardinal Romano. He turned me down from joining the priest factory because I had kids but that didn't stop his boss JC from paying me a personal visit as we just saw. Now that I'm a holy man I feel compelled to pass on my vast wisdom, so here it is. My commandments. 1. Be cool, don't be an asshole. 2. Even if you can't see or feel it, there is a plan and everything at a certain level becomes linked. 3. Enjoy the good, learn from the bad. 4. The bad will pass. 5. Sometimes God breaks your heart to enter it. 6. Have fun, lighten up and help out, because no one gets out alive. 7. If in doubt see rule number 1 and join the dance. Seriously though, I am pleased to say that life has become sweet again and I have plunged back in with full force and passion. If I've demonstrated anything in this tome it is that I've been prepared to take a leap of faith, and when I'm confused, lost or lonely I just remember rule number 1. Appendix, My trip report from the excellent website www.irawa.org. Moon Candy and Portals. LSD by Wingreen. Citation, Wingreen. Moon Candy and Portals, An Experience with LSD, ID 25972. Irawa.org. April 13, 2010. Irawa.org/exp/25972. Dose, T+00 to tablets. Oral Farms, diazepam. T+001 hit oral LSD, blotter-tab. T+11 hit oral LSD, blotter-tab. Body weight, 114 kilograms. I was involved in a consciousness-raising group for 7 years where I learned an interesting mix of Kabbalah, astrology, meditation, Hinduism, the occult and various New Age philosophy as expounded by the likes of Alice A. Bailey and Rudolf Steiner. It left me connected to a higher energy source. Still, once I had got to point A I wanted to get to point B, and I figured LSD would be the Ferrari I would need to get there. I was 33 years old now and wanted the pot of gold at the end of the meditation rainbow. Get me out of this meditation cave, it is nothing but a gladiator grave. It was time for my long and arduous spiritual quest to bear fruit. Plus it was a great distraction from my recent divorce. Let me explain my journey that lead up to this night. I'd taken pot for a few years and had some amazing experience. Initially it was just high times, but it morphed along with my studies into a tool that allowed me to access a place I ended up calling the concept room. I could feel balls of ideas all around me, and it was just a matter of tapping in and experiencing the energy of the idea more than just words. They were like living powers. If for example I said yin, yang, that would really be my whole brain tapping into an understanding of many concepts concurrently. It was like having a book full of advanced physics knowledge instantly. Other experiences ranged from seeing the essence of people and not just what they showed on the surface, to experiencing energy connections between people. So in other words, I was well primed. After a long time of talking to other acid heads/meditation heads and reading a lot of psychedelicized literature, I plunged in with a mate. I had a couple of Valiums as I was very nervous, invoked protection from my guides, and then popped a Red Dragon tab. It tasted sharp and bitter. After about an hour, my mate and I thought nothing was really going to happen, so we ended up having another. Another hour later I disappointedly drove my mate home thinking I'd been sold duds. Suddenly all the street lights were showing the 7 spectrum rainbow bands of light, and it felt like my feet were going through the floor of the car. My mate had exactly the same reaction, and we continued through the rest of the trip synced up. We saw everything at the same time. We decided it had definitely kicked in, and amid much hysterical laughter we shambled back into his house. Looking up at the moon, from his front lawn, was the start of the trip in earnest. The moon separated into 9 moons, all interlinked with triangles in a mandala pattern. I turned to my friend and he was seeing it as well. I had the impression that the different moons were in different dimensions. Then streaming down from the moon came what I felt to be the lunar lords. I couldn't perceive them clearly, but they streamed down to me and their vibrations were like a test. By balancing with them, which involved overcoming terror, we were made to feel so incredibly balanced. Like young gods on the town. We were actors in the cosmic play, riders on the storm. We entered his flat, and lit up a stick of incense. It broke apart into 3 sticks. Everything I really focused on seemed to break apart into a physical, mental and astral form. Then we lit a candle. Around the flame was a golden ring. The flame was being kept alive by this ring, which pulsed with an electron-like ball which did perfect orbits around it. The flame itself gave off sheets of colored energy. Around this time my friend got scared and went to the next room to sleep it off. Left to my own devices, I watched the wallpaper kaleidoscope while understanding such concepts as why time doesn't really exist and thinking of course all the while. At some point waterfalls of white mist-like energy was flowing over everything and all objects took on an infinite/eternal hue. Everything looked perfectly placed within itself and resonating with meaning and being. At some stage I decided to see if I could walk through the wall. It seemed quite achievable at the time. So I placed my hand through the mist on the nearest wall and focused all my attention on moving through it. After a short time the wall cracked open with what I can only describe as something like a translucent membrane being pushed aside, which I could see at the edges of the portal. I was looking into a purple energy realm and there was a group of 8 beings looking at me. They were very friendly, shared a group mind, and had a good sense of humor. They appeared to have been waiting for me and one of them grabbed my hand in a handshake. The purple humanoid/cartoon/cyber-like energy being was inviting me to step in but was in no way pressuring me. I had the impression that they were the violet devas I had read about. They are the devas of shadows locked into our evolutionary cycle who build this energy plane. Like cosmic set designers. I liked them a lot but felt that if I stepped into their realm I may not be able to come back. They themselves just looked on enigmatically awaiting my decision. I decided not this time. After that I had some blurry spots. I must mention that I now no longer had a mind as such but was more a point of attention which was now riding the A train to God knows where. At some stage I heard my still frightened friend moaning in his sleep and I went in to investigate. What I saw was a group of shadows that I was impressed with as being lost souls, but only God knows where these realizations flowed from. I saw that they were trying to enter my friend's dreams because he had the lights on. I could also see that they were stuck in a vast nothing dimension. I had the realization that everyone in this play/level/day-to-day world is blessed. Consciousness can exist on many different bands and the material world is like one narrow frequency. To be here is to be subject to the reality that the Solar Logos chooses to create. It isn't real as such as it is only a dream, but it is like we're in his company and we are the employees. It is a good company although we give up some soul freedom to do the work so as to reap the benefits of soul evolution. Everyone and everything here is developing because of this. While those lost souls I saw were floating in a void of no meaning and were without the level of creative energy needed to establish an authentic reality. This seems to require a mass of souls working in tandem. Think of it like the material cosmos being a coral reef in an ocean. Most of the ocean is void while the reef is teeming with life, a self-enclosed system which supports and grows itself. Anyway, I got scared and turned on the lights, which I now saw as representing the Solar Logos in some way. The shadows, as I knew instinctively, could not exist in the light and cried out pitifully and disappeared. After some blank spells I can't recall, morning came and I felt like the sun's son. His energy seemed to be a part of me, lighting me up from within with an opalescent sheen. Quite literally I was being enlightened. If I closed my eyes I saw an atomic white pulsating energy filled with rainbow pinpricks. It felt like my soul was made from this stuff and I was being given a top-up. My slackmate's girlfriend ended up driving me home but she didn't know I was still furiously tripping. My God, how could she not? I guess it didn't show on the outside that on the inside I was in a different world to her. Once home I lay down to meditate and when I opened my eyes giant interlocked translucent molecular-like globes with 3D stars of David were moving through the room. I have since seen such things in Vatican artworks depicting saints having visions of heavenly hosts. Also they look like the sacred geometry of the seal of life, otherwise known as Archangel Metatron's cube, which is like celestial scaffolding for our universe. I had the impression that all reality is relative and that all truth depends on perspective. Also anything can be made manifest, everything is connected and that we are actually sons and daughters of the sun but due to karma act out our lives in set ways. In the grand scheme this seems to be preordained to a large degree, as our normal egos are just puppets for the universal big mind at large. Suddenly, all along the wall translucent dragons or skeletons, I honestly can't remember which, were moving with serpentine-like motions. After a while I became scared of them. The instant that was happened, a fully clad knight appeared between us. His visor was down, and his sword was pointing in front of him, whilst he stood at attention. I instantly became calm and thanked St. George. In hindsight I feel that these images were archetypes as mentioned in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The spiritual building blocks and supercharged images housed in my subconscious were on display and glowing with phosphorus luminosity. At this exact moment my then recent ex-wife knocked on the door and looked after me. Although we had broken up, she told me that she felt compelled to come and see me to see if I was okay, as she sensed I was in trouble. This was good because I had been tripping now for 14 hours with no sleep and was starting to feel like it was never going to end. It continued for another 12 hours or so, but with no more hallucinations, just weird cold internal energy. Her touch at this stage was totally healing, and I felt love to be one of the strongest forces in the universe. It grounded me and helped me to come back. I felt so far from the material frequency that it seemed strange that people could stay moored there somehow in consensus reality. I finally came back, but my reality had been shattered, and it took years before I finally fully integrated the experience. In the meantime I suffered panic attacks, insomnia, disturbed sleep due to what seemed like astral attacks and alien invasions. Also, I had occasional periods where I felt like I was going crazy and my psyche was under enormous unbearable pressure. Now when I look back on this, I think maybe this was my ego's way of coming back into equilibrium. For years after, I was hypersensitive to energy shifts and felt like I'd lost an energy cocoon of protection. I lost a few jobs during these years as I didn't really care about the material world so much. These days I'm back to normal, or as normal as I get, but I daily feel rushes of bliss energy when I'm near people. Not everybody, just now and then, and it doesn't matter who they are, age, sex, stranger, human, alien, whatever. Also, I've experienced phases of such extreme synchronicity that my life has seemed cartoonish. For example, I had an impression to go out of my way, go into this bookstore on Divine ST and pick up a book. I did this, and the book I opened up said, "Sometimes people pick up books to receive messages." There seems to be a high degree of humor behind the coincidences. Some days it has been like life is a book with everything directly teaching me something. Also, when I meditate now, on a good day, I can feel and remember what it is like to be pure spirit. It feels like the essence of me, but as a being that is intimately connected to the universe in a very real energy sense. It also feels like I've been there many times, but life is a way of making me forget what I know. Ultimately, all this has made me a better person, and certainly one with vast knowledge and, dare I say, wisdom, but it really made me feel unhinged for a long time, which is emotionally exhausting. So remember, kids, be careful, research, and get your dose, setting, and sitter right. Also have a regular meditational practice established which will help you to steer your trip and to also integrate what you learn. Overall, though, it was a worthwhile fast track that made me feel like Jesus at 33. Expid, 25972. Gender, male. Published, April 13, 2006. Views, 53,742. That's all, folks. That should keep you going and open up some weird and wonderful avenues for you. Writing a book is like putting a message in a bottle and dropping it into the ocean of the internet. I'm glad my brave little bottle traversed cyberspace to wash up fortuitously on your shore. God bless you, and thanks for spending time with me.